In the highly competitive heart of Manhattan, the breathtaking and massive architectural marvel of the Tyrotech headquarters dominated the skyline, standing as a physical symbol of absolute power. Ethan Vance, the uncontested and formidable ruler of this multi-billion-dollar commercial empire, was a man who spent his life standing at the absolute pinnacle of the corporate pyramid. He carried a distinct aura that was so icy, calculating, and distant that it kept everyone away. In the cutthroat eyes of the global business elite, Ethan was viewed as an incredibly precise mathematical machine operating without a single emotional flaw. Every critical decision he made was execution-focused and analytical to the point of being completely ruthless. His daily existence was a perfectly mapped line dominated by stock fluctuations, corporate strategies, and international board meetings. This structured order lasted until a chaotic young man named Caleb broke through every security protocol and stormed into the executive suite like an unpredictable asteroid, permanently shattering the silence. Caleb was Chloe's younger brother. A near-fatal car accident had completely upended his normal life, shattering his logic but leaving him with chaotic visions of the future. He often spoke in riddles about events that had not yet occurred, making him a complete outcast to society. Yet on this day, he managed to bypass executive security and march straight toward Ethan. When he looked Ethan in the eye and yelled "brother-in-law" at the top of his lungs, the entire executive floor fell into a dead frozen silence. Watching this unfold in real time through a secure video link, Chloe felt her vision blur with an overwhelming wave of helplessness and panic. Staring at her troublesome brother through the cold monitor, the only thought racing through her mind was that her stable career at this Fortune 500 firm was about to be completely destroyed by that single word. Sitting at the head of the boardroom table, Ethan kept his expression entirely unreadable, his piercing eyes narrowing slightly as the executives around him held their breath, completely unable to guess what the powerful tycoon was thinking. However, the reality shocked everyone involved. Instead of terminating her employment, Ethan sent his personal assistant to deliver an unexpected package to her, a formal legally binding marriage contract. It was not merely the strategic beginning of a standard corporate alliance, it felt like a heavy life sentence handed directly to Chloe. Her practical working-class worldview was completely turned upside down as she found herself forced to participate in a high-stakes game of marital chess. Ethan's private penthouse was an incredibly massive and minimalist space, designed with luxury but lacking any emotional warmth. Its 8 empty rooms stood silent, and none of them could provide comfort to Chloe's anxious, racing heart. Yet, the intimidating man who spent his mornings hidden behind the financial papers began to display a curious and deeply unexpected amount of patience with his new contract wife. Caleb, acting as a self-proclaimed prophet, quickly became the ultimate catalyst for their shifting dynamic. He refused to allow anyone to bring harm to his sister, using his fractured memories to provide a strange layer of protection over Chloe's life. Under the careful and professional arrangements of Ethan's chief assistant, Chloe officially packed her things and moved into the luxury penthouse. The moment they both realized they were genuinely sharing the same living space, the clear boundary between their professional roles and their personal lives began to blur. Chloe, always used to being defensive due to her corporate background, actually presented Ethan with a heavy-duty can of pepper spray as a bizarre housewarming gift on their very first evening. She followed this up with a massive embarrassment when she mistook their high-end housekeeper for Ethan's wealthy mother-in-law. To Ethan, who was thoroughly exhausted by the fake smiles of high society, these strange domestic incidents were incredibly refreshing. He frequently used his morning newspaper to hide his face, while secretly watching her movements with a rare smile playing on his lips. This sharp contrast completely redefined Chloe in his eyes, changing her from a quiet employee into a wonderfully eccentric partner. Caleb understood his sister's quiet struggles, from her late-night anxieties to her specific habits, and he watched his stoic brother-in-law slowly learn how to comfort her soul. The inevitable night they were forced to share a room arrived alongside a severe thunderstorm that rolled across the city skyline. The atmosphere within the master bedroom grew thick with an unspoken, heavy tension. Chloe wrapped herself tightly in a thick blanket, clutching her can of pepper spray like a shield against the powerful man across the room. Ethan lay on the long sofa a few feet away, initially keeping his back turned to her to respect her boundaries. However, as the thunder grew louder in the middle of the night, he slowly turned around in the dark to look at her. He silently watched the woman, who was still frowning deeply in her sleep, her lips moving as she muttered anxiously about their $5 million agreement. In that quiet moment, the stress of the corporate world seemed to dissolve, leaving only two lonely souls connecting in the dark. This arrangement, which had started as a chaotic intervention, was beginning to transform into something deep and real. When the first light of dawn broke through the glass windows, Ethan had a warm breakfast meticulously prepared for her. Looking at the powerful man standing before her and then down at her phone, where his name was saved under the contact 5 million, Chloe laughed. It was the sudden flutter of a heart falling in love and the profound comfort of finally finding a safe harbor. By the time their journey reached its turning point, Chloe had completely stopped evaluating the financial terms that brought them together. Resting against his chest, she caught sight of the subtle initials, CQ, tattooed on his waist, and realized their paths had been set in motion long before the contract was signed. Caleb's strange intervention was merely the universe's way of forcing two opposite individuals into the same orbit. Ethan and Chloe's story had evolved far beyond a typical corporate fairy tale. It was a profound journey of emotional healing and mutual growth. Through this relationship, Chloe transformed into a fierce, independent woman capable of standing firmly by his side in any corporate battle. To the public, Ethan remained the unapproachable and icy ruler of his empire, but Chloe alone understood the absolute warmth hidden beneath that rigid exterior. Their love acted as a quiet light in the dark, illuminating every single obstacle they faced together. It was a deep affection that required no corporate manipulation, only unconditional support. This bond successfully conquered every challenge, bridged the gap between their different worlds, and bloomed beautifully at the edge of the bustling metropolis. No matter how many years passed, that $5 million contract would ultimately evolve into a permanent, lifelong vow to protect one another. Through this extraordinary marriage, they discovered their true identities, allowing two guarded souls to finally merge after a long, lonely wait. Moving forward into the future, they would continue to walk side by side, writing the rest of their story together. They were no longer just strategic business partners, they had become each other's ultimate safe harbor in a chaotic world. This love, powerful enough to reshape their lives, was something meant to be remembered forever because they proved that real affection can rewrite any destiny. The corporate world remained a brutal battlefield, and absolutely nobody in the office could have guessed that Chloe, a quiet and hardworking employee, was the secret wife of the CEO. The man backing her was the formidable Mr. Vance, a name that struck absolute fear into the hearts of competitors across the country. Today, we are diving deep into how this secret couple managed the ultimate game of high-stakes tug-of-war between the office and their home. The story kicked off on a regular morning when the executive elevator doors slid open. Ethan, radiating his usual freezing cold energy, found himself cornered by Vivienne, the wealthy and arrogant heiress of the White Group. Vivienne was throwing out desperate dinner invitations, her tone making it clear she wanted him all to herself to secure an alliance between their families. Chloe, who happened to be walking past with a stack of files, smoothly attempted to fade into the background and become completely invisible. Faced with Vivienne's aggressive flirting, Ethan remained entirely unfazed, delivering a flat, icy rejection. "My wife requires me to be home for dinner every single night," he stated calmly. The look on Vivienne's face was absolutely priceless, while Chloe, standing in the corner, felt her heart race in total panic. "If you thought a secret marriage to the CEO could stay hidden forever in an office full of people, you are dead wrong," a coworker sneered, tossing a fake marriage certificate on her desk. She mocked Chloe, accusing her of pulling pathetic stunts just to get a sliver of attention from management. Chloe was left completely speechless, unable to defend herself because she knew absolutely nobody would believe the truth. To her peers, she was just an ambitious assistant trying to climb the ladder by any means necessary. They had no idea that on the other side of the executive floor, Ethan was looking at the exact same poll results. Staring at the single lonely vote next to Chloe's name, he tapped his finger on the desk with a quiet smile. Life has a funny way of shifting gears when you least expect it. When Ethan accompanied Chloe into a high-end designer furniture boutique, the dynamic between them changed entirely. From luxury display cases to ergonomic chairs, Chloe's eyes held no greed, only absolute focus. She carefully evaluated every piece, selecting items specifically tailored to her husband's daily comfort. Meanwhile, Ethan, a man known for making ruthless multi-million-dollar decisions, followed her quietly like a patient assistant. The moment they both lay down to test a premium mattress, the air between them sparked with genuine attraction. With a simple wave of his hand, Ethan ordered the entire showroom collection to be purchased immediately. It wasn't an empty display of wealth, it was his first sincere, unspoken response to the woman sharing his life. Back in the executive car, Ethan slid his primary black card directly into Chloe's hands. There is no point in keeping secrets about money anymore. "Buy whatever catches your eye, no limits," he said quietly. Those words instantly shattered the artificial boundaries of their temporary marriage agreement. Chloe looked down at the card, a wave of complicated emotions hitting her all at once. Was this man just putting on a brilliant performance, or was he actually starting to fall for her for real? The absolute climax of their arrangement occurred during a massive family dinner that was meant to be a trap. Her elitist aunt tried everything to humiliate Chloe, attacking her appearance, her background and her education. Every single word was designed to cut deep, and Chloe could only force a polite smile while hurting inside. Right at that exact moment, Ethan arrived at the venue, backed by an entire team of assistants carrying rare vintage wine and priceless jade gifts. His presence completely froze the room. The moment he laid their official marriage certificate on the table, it felt like a massive slap to her aunt's pride. He instantly shattered the family's petty arrogance and permanently silenced anyone who would ever look down on Chloe. As the loud gathering faded into the quiet night, they finally had a real conversation. Chloe looked at Ethan, who was resting quietly after a long evening, and asked the question she had been holding back. Ethan didn't offer a scripted answer. Instead, his gentle actions spoke louder than any words ever could. That night, his protective embrace was no longer about fulfilling a contract. It was a display of pure unconditional devotion. From anonymous office gossip to the small details of daily life, their journey felt like a beautifully choreographed dance. They started with awkward, rigid steps, but as the music played on, they became entirely irreplaceable to one another. That is the story of our arrogant yet deeply devoted CEO and his brilliant wife. They turned a high-stakes corporate game into a beautiful reality that anyone would be lucky to find. You see this man moving with great difficulty through the pouring rain, and nobody would ever guess his story. His name is Kevin Liu, and he is 65 years old. In an era where sensual is considered the deadline for a career, his age has become an impossible gap to cross. Even though he graduated from an Ivy League university with over Arshami Major Industry Awards, reality is brutal. He is forced to hide his food delivery vest inside his car and adjust his necktie with deep anxiety. He is here at Roth Technologies for a job interview, but the looks he gets are like invisible knives. Next applicant, Kevin Liu. Is Kevin Liu here? Hearing the assistant call his name, he rushes forward saying, "Yes, I am right here." He enters the interview room with a submissive bow, trying his best to look polite. The interviewer, Matthew Ma, glances at his watch and coldly points toward the empty seat. However, the moment Kevin hands over his resume and states his age, Matthew's indifferent expression changes completely. "Hold on a second, you are 65 years old?" Matthew asks with pure disgust and disbelief in his voice. The female assistant turns completely pale, quickly checking her tablet and stuttering an apology. "I am so sorry, Mr. Ma, I misread his birth year on the application. I am so sorry." Matthew waves his hand dismissively and says, "Forget it, let's just get this over with." Swallowing his deep humiliation, Kevin uses his professional experience to introduce his core technology project. He takes a blue metal flash drive out of his pocket and carefully places it on the desk. "Mr. Ma, this drive contains the core development results from my Arshad-Zanir career, and I believe," before he can even finish his sentence, Matthew slams the resume hard onto the desk and stands up. He explodes in anger at his female assistant, screaming at the top of his lungs, "How do you even do your job? Why are you letting an old man like this in for an interview?" Then Matthew turns his face toward Kevin, looking down on him with absolute arrogance and supreme contempt. "Let me tell you something, old man. You should look in the mirror before coming to an interview here. Stop wasting my time and get the hell out of my sight right now." At that moment, the air in the room turns deathly quiet. Kevin grips his pant legs so hard that his knuckles turn completely white. He does not argue back because a middle-aged man has no leverage in the face of brutal reality. He slowly stands up and bows his spine to these two interviewers who are Arsha years younger than him. "Thank you for your time," he says quietly, but what happens next is even more infuriating and shocking. The moment Kevin turns around to leave, Matthew picks up the blue flash drive containing his life's work. He throws it directly into the trash can next to him like a piece of worthless garbage. What year do you think it is, still carrying a piece of junk like this around? It is completely outdated. The heavy doors slam shut behind him, and Kevin stands in the hallway gripping his fists tight. His fingernails dig deep into his palms, and his eyes turn completely red with unshed tears. Matthew has absolutely no idea what kind of priceless treasure he just threw into the trash. Shortly after Kevin leaves, the sharp sound of high heels echoes down the hallway. A young woman in a white dress and a silver necklace walks over, surrounded by a large group of people. The screen shows her identity, Victoria Roth, CEO of Roth Technologies, worth tens of billions of dollars. "How is the interview process going?" Victoria asks as she pushes the door open, her voice icy cold. Matthew, who was acting so arrogant just a moment ago, instantly turns into a groveling dog. He rushes forward trembling and hands over the files. "Ms. Roth, these are the resumes from today's interviews. Please take a look." Victoria flips through a few pages, her brows furrowing tighter until she slams the folder on the desk. "What kind of garbage candidates are these? I asked for a top Zanir system architect. Hiring these people is a complete waste of time," she barks, making Matthew break into a cold sweat. Victoria sits back in her chair, rubbing her temples with a heavy sigh. Why is it so incredibly difficult to find a talented engineer these days? As she turns her head, her eyes suddenly lock onto the trash can next to the desk. A blue metal flash drive is lying right on top of the garbage. Driven by her sharp intuition, Victoria reaches out her long, elegant hand and picks it up. The moment she plugs the drive into her computer, the data and system architecture models shock her completely. Her cold, beautiful face turns from indifference to absolute amazement within 2 short seconds. Victoria jumps straight out of her chair and leans in close to the computer screen. Her breathing turns rapid as she whispers to herself in pure awe. "Oh my god, this core algorithm and Sendi architecture are absolutely revolutionary in this industry. Quick, find out who left this drive here immediately." Meanwhile, Kevin has no idea that his life is about to take a massive turn. He sits lost in his car, his mind replaying Matthew's vicious insults over and over again. "Am I really too old? Am I completely useless now? But there is nothing wrong with my skills. Real life never stops its fatal pace just because a man is drowning in sorrow." The phone on his dashboard charger suddenly starts vibrating continuously. An official notification from Chase Bank reminds him that his mortgage and car payments are past due. Right after that, a text message from his ex-gen wife, Chloe, pops up. "Send me $3,000 right now. It is urgent." Then a notification from his son Tyler appears. "Dad, my phone is broken. I want the latest iPhone tomorrow." Looking at these cold, demanding messages, Kevin lets out a silent, bitter laugh. This is the brutal reality of a middle-aged man. The pain of unemployment, the crushing weight of bills, and a family that offers zero understanding. These things crush him like a mountain, but he has no time to break down. He silently takes off his suit, puts on his bright food delivery vest, and gets on his electric bike. He rides out into the stormy night, risking his life in the pouring rain, just for a few dollars of delivery fees. Late at night, a completely exhausted Kevin finally returns to his house. Standing at the entrance, holding his vest, he tries to give his son a pleasing smile. But what waits for him is a brutal and heartless strike from his own child. "Son, come eat, the noodles are still hot. Tell me, how was school today?" Kevin asks, smiling timidly, but Tyler looks at him with pure disgust, swinging his hand and smashing the bowl to the floor. The ceramic bowl shatters into pieces, splashing hot soup and noodles everywhere. "I don't want your stupid noodles." Tyler stands up and screams hysterically at his father. Instead of scolding her son, Chloe slams her hand on the table and points at Kevin's face. "Why are you yelling at my son? Is he wrong? All you do is make cheap noodles with your pathetic money." Kevin drops his head with a weak voice saying, I didn't see your text message earlier. You didn't see it. Are you completely blind?" Chloe snaps with venomous words and pure hatred in her eyes. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing I was today? I found a luxury bracelet and was short by $300 because you didn't reply or transfer the money. The sales staff looked at me like I was a joke." Tyler loudly complains, using emotional blackmail to blame Kevin for being too cheap to buy him a new phone. He claims he won't be able to hold his head up at his graduation party tomorrow in front of his friends. Chloe points at Kevin's nose and commands, "You will buy him the latest iPhone tomorrow. Do you hear me?" Looking at the broken pieces on the floor and his ungrateful family, Kevin's heart sinks to the absolute bottom. He says nothing, quietly kneeling down to pick up the sharp ceramic shards with his calloused hands. A sharp piece instantly cuts his finger, and bright red blood drips onto the hardwood floor. Chloe watches this happen, but instead of showing any sympathy, she lets out a cold, disgusted snort. "Look at you, you are nothing but a pathetic loser who can't even stand up for himself. Make sure you look presentable for your son's graduation tomorrow. If anyone finds out you are a delivery guy, we will be disgraced for the rest of our lives." Tyler holds his mother's arm, looking down at his kneeling father with absolute contempt. "Yeah, Dad, I am your son. Don't tell me you are too cheap to buy me a phone. Look at my friends' dads. None of them are as pathetic as you." The cruelty of his family and the humiliation of society finally explode like a volcano inside Kevin's chest. He stands up violently, slamming the sharp ceramic shards back onto the floor. He lets out a hysterical, deafening roar that echoes through the house. "Unless you want to choose an early grave, shut up." The roar of a desperate man carrying his last shred of dignity makes Chloe and Tyler gasp in pure terror. They stand completely frozen in their tracks as Kevin's eyes turn bloodshot, tears streaming down his face. He points at his wife and son, his voice sounding like a broken, dying animal. "Is it just about a phone? I gave you a luxurious life for years. I am a human being, not an animal. You two are my family. Why can't you show some empathy? I take endless insults out there just to provide. Do you have any idea how hard it is?" After her initial shock, Chloe catches the key piece of information in his words. She narrows her eyes, looking at him with absolute disbelief. "Insults out there? Aren't you a director at a tech firm? What are you actually doing every day?" Kevin snaps completely, ripping his delivery vest out from under the couch cushion and throwing it at her face. "Yes, I am delivering food. I lost my job 6 months ago. I hid it because I didn't want you to worry delivering food until midnight while searching for a job. If I didn't work myself to the bone, where do you think the mortgage, car payments, and utilities came from? I wanted to find another tech job, but every company rejects me because of my age. They don't want me." However, hearing the truth about her husband's sacrifice does not bring any comfort or warmth to to Chloe. Instead, her expression turns colder than ice within a single second. She raises her chin proudly, speaking with the tone of absolute detachment and heartless cruelty. Fine, I don't care about your excuses. Since you find this life so hard, let's just end it. Let's get a divorce. Get a divorce. Those words hit Kevin's chest like a massive sledgehammer. He stops crying instantly, staring at the woman he shared a bed with for 20 years with absolute terror. He rushes forward, grabbing Chloe's hand tightly with a trembling, begging voice. Chloe, you were just joking with me, right? We can't get a divorce. I am sorry for losing my temper just now. I apologize. We have been together for 20 years. But Chloe shoves his hand away without a single shred of mercy, her disgust completely clear. Who is joking with you? Kevin, look at yourself. I married you because I wanted a rich life. Now you are old, you have no job, no savings, and you deliver food like a loser. You are an embarrassment. I see your step count on my app every day, and I blocked you because it is humiliating. Tyler stands up too, looking at his father with absolute coldness. Exactly. My friends' dads buy them cars and houses, and you can't even afford a phone. Having a delivery guy for a dad makes me a laughingstock at school. Chloe continues her psychological abuse, spitting out the cruelest words possible. Kevin, listen to your own son. You are a complete failure as a husband and a father. If I woke up looking like you, I would honestly just end my life. Looking at these two people who feel no pain for him and are pushing him to die, Kevin's eyes turn completely dead. Despair means absolutely nothing in the face of money and superficial greed. He slowly raises his head, taking one last deep look at Chloe and Tyler. Suddenly, a strange calm washes over him, and a cold smile appears on his face. Fine. Chloe freezes for a moment. Kevin takes a deep breath, his voice completely devoid of any human warmth. Let's get a divorce. See you at court tomorrow. The next day outside the family court, the morning sun is blindingly bright. Kevin walks out of the main gates first, holding the signed divorce agreement in his hand behind him. Chloe and Tyler walk out with arrogant expressions. You left with absolutely nothing. Kevin, that was your choice. We are officially strangers now, Chloe calls out. Even if you starve to death on the streets, don't you dare come back begging us for help. Tyler turns his head away in disgust, refusing to look at his father for even a single second. Kevin does not look back or slow down. He just walks forward into the sunlight with a straight spine. 20 years of being trapped in a toxic marriage are completely over, and he is finally free. Meanwhile, inside the executive office of Roth Technologies, Victoria rubs her temples. She speaks to her mother over the phone with a frustrated sigh. Mom, I told you it is hard to find a chief architect for the new AI system. Stop rushing me. After hanging up, her assistant, Sarah, rushes in and hands over a detailed file. Ms. Roth, we found him. The owner of that blue flash drive is Kevin Liu, 65 years old. Your intuition is incredible. Mr. Liu was a legendary chief engineer who developed multiple hit systems. Unfortunately, he was betrayed by his former partners who stole his patents, and his age made it hard to find work. Victoria flips through Kevin's profile, seeing how he was rejected by various companies just because he is Seshaba. The young billionaire CEO slams the folder onto her desk with deep respect and absolute resolve. History is full of geniuses who achieved greatness later in life. He is only Seshaba at the absolute peak of his skills. Those tech companies rejecting him because of his age are nothing but short-sighted fools. Victoria stands up elegantly, adjusting her black suit dress with complete determination in her eyes. Get the car ready. We are going to meet Mr. Liu right now. We must bring a top-tier talent like him into our company, no matter what it takes. Night falls as the city lights turn on across New York. Kevin, who now has absolutely nothing to his name, sits alone on a cheap red plastic stool at a night market stall. 6 or 7 empty beer cans are scattered across the worn wooden table. An old radio at the stall plays a classic melody. Listening to the music, he remembers his youth when he worked all night in the lab with absolute passion. Now he is unemployed, his family is shattered, and his own son and ex-then wife told him to drop dead. He has no place left to go in this city. The breakdown of a middle-aged man happens in a split second. Kevin's eyes turn red as silent tears stream down his face. He lifts a beer can with a trembling hand, drinking the ice and cold alcohol to numb his deep humiliation. While Kevin is trapped in his darkest hour, a black Porsche Panamera slowly pulls up next to the stall. Ignoring the shocked and amazed stares of the crowd, she walks into the dirty night market stall, carrying premium beer. Under Kevin's completely stunned gaze, Victoria walks to his table and places the beer down. Hello, Mr. La, Victoria says, her clear voice instantly cutting through the noise of the stool. Ms. Roth, what on earth are you doing here? He stammers. Victoria smiles warmly and pulls out a plastic stool, sitting right across from him without any arrogance. She looks at the tired but honorable man in front of her with deep respect and sympathy. I know what happened at the office today. It wasn't your fault. They are just fools who can't recognize true genius. Your architecture model is absolutely brilliant, and that is why I came here personally to recruit you. Looking at this billionaire CEO sitting at a dirty night market table just to comfort his broken soul, Kevin drops his head. He sniffs as tears well up in his eyes once again. Thank you, Ms. Roth, but I am 65 years old. Companies reject me, and my own family called me a pathetic failure. Victoria narrows her eyes with protective anger, cracking open a beer and handing it to him with absolute authority. None of that matters to me. Your experience and genius are priceless. Join Roth Technologies as our Chief Technology Officer with a millions and dollars salary and prime stock options. At that cheap plastic table, the billionaire CEO and the broken man drink beer and talk about their dreams. Loud genuine laughter echoes from the stall as Victoria completely clears the darkness from Kevin's mind. After a few drinks, Kevin looks at the beautiful young woman who understands him so deeply. Thank you, Victoria. Tonight I felt like I couldn't go on, but things are much better now. Victoria leans back against her plastic chair with a slight flush on her cheeks. She reaches out her elegant hand, wearing a white jade bracelet, and gently places it over Kevin's calloused hand. Kevin shudders slightly but does not pull away, feeling the genuine warmth of her touch. Don't mention it, we are partners now. Besides, you kept me company tonight, and life is rarely perfect anyway. The night breeze blows past, and empty cans pile up on the table. Kevin feels the alcohol hitting him and waves his hand with an unsteady smile. No more for me, Ms. Roth, or I am going to get completely drunk. Let's call it a night, he says, trying to stand up, but due to the alcohol, his body sways violently, and he loses his balance completely. Victoria quickly reaches out to catch him, but in the clumsy rush, Kevin knocks them both onto a small cot nearby. Victoria ends up lying completely inside Kevin's strong embrace. Under the dim yellow lights of the night market, their bodies are pressed tightly against each other without any space. Kevin's large hand instinctively wraps around Victoria's slender waist, and her beautiful face is just inches from his. Her warm alcohols and scented breath hits his face clearly. The noise of the surrounding market completely fades away, leaving only the sound of their synchronized breathing. The destined bond between the billionaire CEO and the middle-aged man is officially ignited. Meanwhile, in the shadows across the street, Chloe and Tyler are standing together watching the scene. Mom, I confirmed it. My godfather, David Joe, is actually my real biological father. He had to flee the country years ago due to some bad business, which is why he used Kevin to get me legal status. Now he is back in New York with millions, and we are moving into high society. That loser Kevin deserves to be dumped. Chloe rolls her eyes and laughs coldly. I knew it all along, which is why I divorced him so fast. Our life is going to be amazing from now on. That broke loser Kevin is destined to deliver food for the rest of his life. However, as their eyes drift back to the market stall, they freeze completely. The man they threw out like trash is currently holding Victoria Roth, the richest bachelorette in the city, on a bed. Chloe and Tyler's eyes pop out of their heads, their smug smiles completely vanishing as their bodies shake in terror. Victoria Roth, the chairman of Roth Technologies. How is this even possible? Tyler stammers, turning pale. On the first day of his son's success, he actually forced his own father to kneel in public. The young and arrogant Tyler stood there in a sharp suit, looking incredibly smug and proud. He turned to a middle-aged man and shouted with deep flattery, "Hey there, Godfather." Following his gaze, a wealthy man named David stood there, holding a flashy, dramatic woman named Chloe. David laughed out loud, slapping Tyler on the shoulder and shouting proudly to the entire crowded room, "Today is my godson's very first day on the job here at this great institution. As his godfather, I am obviously here to support him and show everyone who he has backing him." But right in the middle of this celebration, the scene took a sudden, dark, and violent turn. Several security guards in uniform suddenly grabbed a middle-aged man wearing a beige luxury blazer. This man was none other than Tyler's actual biological father, a brilliant engineer named Kevin. Kevin had his arms twisted brutally behind his back as the guards forced him down to the floor. His knees slammed hard against the freezing marble tiles, causing him to groan out in sudden pain. As his biological son, Tyler did not move a single finger to help his own father stand up. Instead, he walked over with an icy, heartless expression and pointed his finger directly at Kevin's face. Do you see this? This right here is the true difference between successful people and losers. My godfather is a core business partner of the Roth Group. But what about a failure like you? You are just a delivery guy who stole a badge to sneak inside. You cannot be my father. Kevin held back the agonizing pain in his knees, his eyes filled with absolute heartbreak and pure despair. He looked at the boy he had sacrificed everything to raise, his voice shaking, but filled with strength. A bad son is the fault of a father who failed to teach him values properly. I spent too much time earning money and ignored your education, turning you into a heartless monster. You were completely shameless, bowing down to a common criminal and calling him your godfather. But Tyler felt absolutely no shame at all, reacting like a feral animal being backed into a corner. He began to scream hysterically frantically at the top of his lungs, his face turning completely red with rage. The old man is still talking back. "You are a useless failure. Stop pretending you have authority over me." David joined in from the side, laughing coldly while blowing thick smoke rings into the clean air. "Just pushing him down isn't enough. Kid, you need to teach this old man a real lesson. Otherwise, he will keep stealing things around this office, and you might lose your precious new job." To make a great impression on his rich godfather, Tyler's eyes turned incredibly cruel and sharp. He pointed straight at Kevin's head and looked back at David, asking for his ultimate opinion. "Godfather, what do you think we should do to handle a loser like this permanently?" David smiled coldly and pulled Chloe closer to his side, letting out a sharp mocking laugh. "Make him kneel down and apologize to you right now in front of everyone here, and make him promise to never look for you or your mother ever again. Simple as that." Hearing those words, Kevin shook with absolute fury, staring straight into David's criminal eyes. "You want me to kneel down and beg my own biological son for forgiveness? You will burn in hell." Seeing this, Tyler rushed forward and grabbed Kevin tightly by his collar, screaming like a lunatic, "How dare you speak to my godfather like that? Kneel down before him. Kneel down right now." The security guards increased their pressure, forcing Kevin's body down against the hard floor. Kevin fought back with all his strength, but his bones popped under the overwhelming force. He screamed out in pure agony, "Get off me, Tyler, you have completely lost your mind." Right at the absolute climax of this public humiliation, the elevator doors nearby slid open. A cold and powerful female CEO named Victoria stepped out, wearing a sharp tailored black suit, surrounded by her personal secretary and top executives. She walked forward with an expression of pure ice. She looked at the chaotic mess in the lobby with deep disgust, walking quickly in her high heels. Victoria's sudden appearance made Tyler and David change their expressions into polite smiles instantly. The vice president running the lobby ran over to her like a dog, trying to take credit. "Welcome, Chairman. I just caught a thief who had the audacity to steal your personal security badge. He was even claiming to be the chief engineer of our tech group, but I caught him." David quickly stepped forward, putting on a massive fake smile to support the vice president's claim. "That is absolutely true, Ms. Roth. We can all testify against this old criminal right here. He was using your badge to show off. A loser like this must be punished severely for our reputation." Tyler's mother, Chloe, rolled her eyes dramatically and added more fuel to the fire. "Ms. Roth, I know this old man better than anyone. He failed his interview here before. He must be doing this out of pure revenge, though I didn't know he had this much energy." Tyler acted like a groveling pet in front of Victoria, pointing at Kevin on the floor. "Chairman, he is just a pathetic food delivery guy. Please do not let his lies trick you." At this exact moment, these fools honestly believed they were experiencing the greatest moment of their lives. They completely failed to notice that Victoria's face had turned entirely dark with absolute fury. While David and the others waited to see Kevin thrown out into the streets by security, Victoria spoke. Her voice was incredibly cold, cutting through the silence of the crowded lobby like a knife. "Oh, it turns out I made a mistake, and you people have absolutely nothing to do with him. Fine. Since that is the case, all business partnerships with David are permanently cancelled starting today." Those words hit the lobby like a massive lightning strike, shocking everyone into absolute silence. David's fake smile froze instantly on his face, his eyes rolling back in pure shock and horror. "What, Ms. Roth? Please tell me you are joking. You cannot cancel our contracts like this." Chloe also turned pale with sudden terror, screaming out with a desperate voice, "Ms. Roth, you must have the wrong person. Tyler is an incredibly talented young man. Even though he lived with that useless old man for a bit, he is pure and perfect for your firm." Victoria did not even bother to look at them, turning her back with absolute indifference. David's legs gave out completely, and he fell straight to his knees on the floor before her. All of his previous arrogance disappeared instantly as he began to slap his own face repeatedly. "I beg for your mercy. Please give me one more chance. All my money is tied up in this deal. If this partnership is cancelled, I will go completely bankrupt and lose everything I own." However, an even bigger and more shocking twist was about to happen right before their eyes. Victoria completely ignored David on the floor, walking slowly over to Kevin instead. She reached out her elegant hands and personally helped Kevin stand up from the marble floor. She gently brushed the dust off his suit jacket with an incredibly soft and tender touch. Then she turned around, her sharp and piercing gaze scanning the shocked faces of the crowd. She announced each word with absolute power and authority, her voice echoing through the building. "You say I have the wrong person. It is your own eyes that are completely blind. Kevin has won countless major industry awards since his university days, leading this entire tech sector. He has personally developed dozens of critical tech patents that drive our modern world forward. His brilliant mind alone is worth more than 10 publicly traded corporations combined. He is the chief engineer of the Roth Group, and I personally recruited him back to lead us." Hearing the words chief engineer, Tyler and Chloe's minds went completely blank with shock. Chloe collapsed onto the floor, her lips shaking violently as she stared at her ex-Dan husband. "Kevin, how could you possibly possibly possess this kind of immense power and status? Tyler, who had just been humiliating his father, fell to his knees without any dignity. He crawled forward and grabbed Kevin's leg, crying hysterically like a pathetic child. "Dad, you are my real father. I was just confused and foolish a moment ago. Please forgive me. We have over 20 years of father and son bond. We cannot just throw that away over a mistake. I promise to be a good son from now on. Tell Mom to marry you again so we can be a family." Looking at this disgusting child who would throw away his dignity for money, Kevin felt only pure hatred. He kicked Tyler away with absolute coldness, his voice sounding like a freezing winter wind. "I told you before, never call me your father again. I am completely done with you. As for the tech project, I will handle it for Victoria. Get out of my sight right now." Just as Chloe and Tyler tried to move forward to beg and cause another scene, Victoria laughed. She slowly reached into the inside pocket of her tailored suit jacket and pulled out a document. It was a bright red fresh marriage certificate, which she opened up proudly for everyone to see. On the paper, the names Kevin Liu and Victoria Roth were written clearly next to a happy photo. Victoria wrapped her arm tightly around Kevin's, looking at the crowd with immense pride. "This incredible man belongs to me now. Get these blind, pathetic parasites out of my building." But the business world is a brutal battlefield, and another massive storm was already arriving. Just as the crowd was celebrating this incredible twist, a loud mocking laugh came from the entrance. The wealth and pride turned to dust, leaving a permanent lesson in this corporate war. Joey wrote her 101st letter to her mom on her 18th birthday. This was her final attempt to talk to the woman who left her at birth. Every single word on the paper was soaked in years of isolation and despair. Her mother passed away from a difficult labor right when she was born. For the next 8 years, everyone around looked at her with pure hatred. Bold and focused, displaying incredible stability. With every pull of the trigger, a loud pop signaled another balloon bursting into pieces. This venting behavior stood in stark contrast to the fragile, helpless girl she appeared to be in public. In this psychological game, she was using raw violence and destruction to find a desperate balance, trying to blast away the terrifying void left by her missing memories. When the noise finally faded, a dead silence settled over the night. Juliet lay exhausted on her narrow dorm bed, a faded gray plush toy sitting quietly next to her pillow, the single piece of comfort she had managed to rescue from therapy. She turned over, staring blankly into the toy's black plastic eyes. As she stared, a spark of insight hit her mind, instantly connecting a crucial clue that everyone had overlooked. The metal rooftop door had never been forced open or kicked in by an intruder. It had been opened cleanly with a key. Why did Leo go to such lengths? He had rushed back to the complex in the pouring rain, and days prior, he had specifically gone out of his way to pay a locksmith to copy that key. These bizarre actions made no sense on the surface, but under cold logic, they closed the loop on a heartbreaking conclusion. His death was never a sudden decision, but a meticulously planned goodbye. Furthermore, as the pieces fell into place, her mind began to wander to an even darker thought. Was her mother's death, ruled a car accident years ago, truly an accident? The truth felt like a bottomless abyss. The deeper she went, the colder it got. She had to uncover everything, not just to give Leo justice, but to find peace for her own sanity. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Leo was working exhausting hours in a greasy restaurant kitchen. His reunion with his father, Frank, brought zero joy, highlighting the bitter reality of lower-class survival. Frank's constant bowing to rude customers over a few dollars, combined with his total surrender to a harsh reality, emphasized the crushing weight of their existence. After a night of heavy drinking, Frank looked at his exhausted son with bloodshot eyes, promising he would do whatever it took to get him through college. But that promise of fatherly love became the heaviest psychological weight Leo had to carry. To raise the tuition, Leo sacrificed all his energy and dignity, eventually reaching a dead end where the university forced him to drop out. Deep in the dark school hallway, the silhouette of him crouching on the floor with his head buried in his knees became the most heartbreaking image of the story. Looking through the eyes of the plush toy, Juliet could almost see Leo's despairing gaze, a total surrender to fate, and a final struggle for love. She finally understood that all these seemingly coincidental tragedies were just the crushing weight of life. The seeds of disaster had been sown 24 years ago by that older generation, only to completely shatter Juliet's mind today. Yet facing this despair, her gaze hardened. She knew she had to keep walking this thorny, bloody path until every single truth was revealed. Frank slammed down his drink, the cheap alcohol rushing straight to his head. He turned to his son with a flushed neck, his words dripping with bitter sarcasm and unearned arrogance. He yelled that being at the top of the class was completely useless, if it amounted to nothing but waste paper that couldn't bring in a single dime. The father ordered Leo to go buy him more alcohol immediately. Seeing his son stand still, he threatened threatened to break his legs if he wasn't back in 10 minutes, ensuring he'd never leave this miserable place. Leo listened in silence from the dark corner, his body shaking with rage, his fists clenching until his knuckles popped, but deep in his eyes, a spark of rebellion flared into a roaring flame. To survive, and raise tuition money, he and his companion walked grueling distances through the city's underbelly. The blazing sun scorched his skin, and sweat poured down his neck into his rough collar as his physical strength reached its absolute limit. Every heavy load pressed against his shoulders, ruthlessly exploiting his labor. The alleys of the old town were a dark labyrinth that never saw the sun. Supporting each other, they pushed through the dense crowds with extreme effort, every step a battle for their souls. During a brief rest, they crouched on the steps outside a restaurant to share a cheap pastry. His friend looked at Leo with pity, handing him a drink to ease his exhaustion. They spoke in hushed tones, the conversation always returning to the infuriating reality of Leo's home life. Leo's gaze remained cold and steady as he spoke of the unfairness of fate and the abusive bastard who took pleasure in his torment. Inside a bright classroom, students gathered to gossip about why the top student had suddenly dropped out. In the empty room, his friend quietly revealed the truth to a classmate. Leo's father had been working an illegal job under the table and got scammed out of every cent to pay off that endless debt and rescue his mother from that monster's grip. Leo had to abandon his education to work as a manual laborer. The girl's eyes grew watery as she stared at the empty desk, feeling a profound, helpless sorrow. At Leo's front door, the streetlights stretched their shadows long against the pavement. In that instant, a nauseating, metallic stench hit them. Leo stopped in his tracks, spotting a massive, horrific splash of deep red liquid under the dim corner light. It wasn't just blood, it was mixed with filth, maliciously thrown against the door like a scene from a horror movie. It was an unmistakable threat, a calling card left by the thugs his father owed money to. Leo's anger boiled over, his fists clenching until his knuckles popped, finally seeing the absolute selfishness and incompetence of his father. Inside, his mother trembled, cowering next to an old cabinet. The father strolled in through the front door, showing zero remorse for the gruesome sight outside. Instead, he maintained his arrogant, deadbeat attitude, turning his aggression onto his son who had just returned. A violent confrontation erupted between them. Leo pointed at the defiled walls, his voice shaking as he demanded to know exactly how much trouble his father had dragged to their doorstep. The arrival of a legal team marked the turning point of the conflict. On a rainy night, they entered the dilapidated courtyard with absolute authority. The lawyer held a thick stack of documents detailing ironclad evidence of the father's criminal activities. The lawyer spoke with flat, devastating professionalism, instantly crushing the father's remaining bravado. It turned out Leo was never alone. A mysterious Miss Juliet had been quietly watching over him, using her influence to completely shift the power dynamic without a sound. The legal judgment came down swiftly before everyone's eyes, a 5-year prison sentence. For the abusive father, his sins were finally answered. In that moment, the boy who had spent his youth drowning in hardship finally found his salvation. In the end, peace settled over the house. The warm glow of a candle illuminated his mother's calm face and lit up Leo's path forward. Having survived the dark storm, his life was finally filled with light. Leo looked up at the night sky, making a silent vow to give his mother a proper life. Inside a dimly lit room filled with the scent of old age in San Francisco, a lonely young man named Leo stopped at the door. He bent down and picked up a button that seemed to have been forgotten on the floor. This was more than just a movement. It was the beginning of his connection to the world, and every gesture carried an indescribable persistence. He carefully sewed the button back onto his plaid shirt, each stitch feeling like a stubborn patch on his compromises with life. In the dim surroundings, his focused gaze was entirely fixed on that single button. It was a part of him, a vessel for his spirit, and the only certainty he could cling to in his current turbulent existence. In the tense conversation that followed, an unspoken standoff seemed to freeze the air between them. As the beaded bracelet swayed in the light and shadow, they began to talk about Frank's family, their words heavy with gravity. The description of the miserable life of Frank's son, coupled with the brutal reality that both parents suffered from severe mental illness, turned the once warm moment completely somber. This was the untouchable pain deep within Leo's heart, and the very source of his current desperation. Under the cover of night at Frank's house, Mrs. Wang's hysterical screaming tore through the silence. The forced gratitude she demanded was a noose around Leo's neck. Using this as leverage, she greedily demanded that Leo stay by her side forever, creating a suffocating parasitic relationship. Yet Leo realized that everyone around him had become an inescapable nightmare, a torment exposed in its rawest form, to say nothing of Leo himself, who was tightly locked in the jaws of fate. The presence of Juliet became the only bright spot in this gloomy unlikely story. She did not just care about Leo's psychological state, she rationally helped him untangle the web of mysteries. The key, the missing key that granted access to the roof of Building 6 became the crucial turning point. When they realized that only specific managers and janitors held access, her analysis sparked a tacit understanding born of desperation. They realized this was no simple accident, it was a meticulously planned conspiracy, a tragic script already written to the end. As they searched for clues in the pouring rain, the water soaked Leo's clothes and chilled his remaining hope to the bone. Juliet's voice was gentle, yet every word carried the weight of a sledgehammer. The truth about how Mrs. Wang had hidden the key and framed him caused Leo's world to collapse instantly. The revelation brought no liberation, instead, it plunged him into deep self-doubt. Faced with this brutal reality, Leo finally saw the darkest side of human nature, a realization that left him trembling. He began to fight against his seemingly invincible destiny through sheer hard work. The moment the boba shop started bustling with business, a long-lost smile finally appeared on Leo's face. This pure sense of achievement formed a stark contrast to the dark anxiety of his past. The bond forged among the team members over a shared goal allowed them to break free from the shackles of reality, if only for a brief moment. Yet, all this beauty was incredibly fragile. When they arrived at Juliet's house, the image in the photo was unsettlingly eerie. Seeing how the faces of young Joey and young Juliet perfectly overlapped in the photograph created a mirror effect across time, striking profound shock into the hearts of everyone present. In that quiet living room sealed away by time, the warm yellow light was dim, casting a nostalgic soft glow over all the vintage objects. Microscopic dust motes danced silently in the intersecting light and shadow, each grain seemingly whispering an untold story from the past. On the wall, an intricately carved wooden clock swung its heavy pendulum back and forth. Its crisp, rhythmic ticking became the only melody in the entire room. The girl's fingertips lightly brushed the frayed edges of the photo album. It was not just a casual flip through the pages, it was a touch bordering on reverence. She was trying to reconstruct the face of her grandmother, who had long since vanished into the mists of time through these faded photographs. Her voice was so low, it seemed to echo only in her own ears, yet it trembled with intense concentration. Each word she uttered felt like a desperate search for a remnant of warmth in the wilderness of her memory. Sitting beside her, her aunt rested her elbows on her knees, her eyes flickering with a complex and contradictory light. That light dimmed when she looked at the photos, but burned intensely the moment she looked at the girl, like a flame flickering in the wind. The aunt took every breath with extreme caution, as if the slightest heavy exhale would shatter this rare tranquility. She observed every subconscious habit of the girl, the slight bend of the knuckles when she pushed up her glasses, the way a few strands of hair fell by her ear when she lowered her head. These details pierced the aunt's heart like needles. This was a bloodline code etched into the bones, an imprint that 20 years of time could not erase. The urge to reveal the secret echoed constantly in her chest, but whenever she looked into the girl's clear eyes, she was paralyzed by an inexplicable fear. She worried that once the truth was spoken, this fragile balance would instantly collapse. The air in the living room felt frozen, while the heavy ticking of the clock marched on mercilessly, signaling that an irreversible turning point was quietly drawing near. In the shadows of the room, the young boy maintained his unsettling posture, leaning forward, ready to intervene in the conversation at any given second. His gaze operated like a precise instrument, calculating the psychological shifts of everyone in the room. He watched the aunt's trembling hands and the girl's oblivious profile, feeling a wild desire for control surge deep within him. He knew that a secret capable of altering the trajectory of everyone's lives lay buried in this house. Like a patient hunter, he waited silently for the perfect moment, waiting for the tightly stretched net to snap open at the slightest vibration. Leo's pale face and his occasionally uncontrollable coughs felt incredibly jarring in this terrifyingly quiet space. The girl looked at him, and the hidden anxiety in her eyes became his only comfort in this long struggle. He turned his head slightly, avoiding her worried gaze, unwilling to let her see his failing body. He knew he was playing a losing game against time, yet he pursued it relentlessly. Even if every step brought excruciating pain, he had to fulfill his ultimate wish. That deep devotion was not just for the girl but for the idealistic past he had once sworn to protect. Everyone in the living room held their own hidden agendas, walking a tightrope between lies and truth. They were like moths trapped in a spider's web. The more they thrashed, the tighter the invisible threads wound around them. Finally, a sudden confrontation over his health erupted, tearing away everyone's disguises and exposing the raw, bleeding truth underneath. The girl's tears, Leo's silence, and the aunt's terror played out like a rehearsed tragedy, magnified frame by frame under the dim light, permanently branding itself into their lives. It was not until that afternoon, when the girl stood in the yard forgotten by time, listening to the wind rustling through the treetops and feeling the resonance deep within her bloodline, that she finally understood that love was never about simple companionship. It was a fierce determination to walk alone in the dark, holding up the sky for someone else in the midst of despair. The pendant she always wore close to her body gleamed with a warm luster in the sunset, like a silent promise bridging two eras, connecting a redemption of life and death with a final goodbye. As she stepped out of the courtyard and walked into the distance, that heavy sense of purpose became the most solid anchor for the rest of her life. She was no longer a child waiting for riddles to be answered. She was a warrior who held the truth, marching calmly through the storm. No matter what final ending awaited her, she was ready. She knew that in that distant past swallowed by time, a man had loved her so deeply that even if that love ultimately dissolved into nothing but empty stars, it would be enough to light up all her remaining years. This was the most brutal, yet most beautiful part of the story, and the reason why, on countless sleepless nights, she would subconsciously reach for the pendant, feeling that warm unyielding connection, reaching out from another time. Afterward, the scene shifted to a private conversation between Leo and his mysterious coordinator, Eric, revealing the darkest corner of the entire scheme. Leo's fingers traced the photograph where the girl's sweet, clear smile became a source of pure torture to his eyes. His arrangement for the transfer student, Sam, was born not out of schoolyard friendship, but out of a calculated desire for absolute control. Leo's gaze turned chillingly cold, as if he were examining a bonsai tree waiting to be pruned. Sam's arrival was not just an anomaly at the high school, he was a crucial pawn placed on this grand chessboard. The order for Sam to record the girl's every word in action sounded ordinary, but every syllable carried total surveillance over her privacy. Once that small phone was tightly gripped in Sam's hand, the tentacles of this surveillance reached everywhere. Leo stood like a puppet master on a high platform, watching the oblivious girl focus on her studies in the classroom, a complex smile playing on his lips. There was love in that smile, but it was heavily outweighed by a distorted obsessive possessiveness that would rather destroy everything than let her out of his sight. At this stage, the story suspense intensified sharply. Every glance Sam gave at school and his deliberate isolation from others on the field became part of Leo's surveillance network. The girl remained completely unaware, still finding warmth in Sam's apparent kindness, never suspecting that every comforting word and every breakfast handed to her was remotely controlled by Leo from behind the scenes. This twisted affection continued to ferment and expand in this gamble against fate, eventually blinding the girl and slowly eroding whatever sanity Leo had left. Under the facade of normal school life, the truth of this surveillance ran like a subterranean current, ready to drag her into an unknown storm at any moment. This was the ultimate irony of the story's emotional core. Love could disguise itself as such an airtight prison. To Leo, every smile the girl gave in the afternoon sun became a forbidden fruit that brought both agony and satisfaction. He looked at the logs concerning her life, recognizing that it was not love, but a magnificent, inescapable cage he had hand-built using the dying light of his own life. The suffocating weight of being watched eventually reached a breaking point when a casual glance from the girl seemed to pierce through the barrier of time, locking eyes directly with the man in the shadows in a silent clash of souls. In that moment, there was no sound, but Leo read an ultimate skepticism of this excessive care in her clear eyes. In that precise instant, the seemingly unbreakable bond of trust between them suffered a fatal crack. This emotional rupture plunged Leo into a deeper psychological crisis and signaled that the impending conflict would explode in an even more devastating manner. The windowsill in the school cafeteria became the final battleground for their emotional confrontation. The swaying shadows outside made Leo's silhouette look incredibly fragile. The three wooden carvings in his hand trembled slightly against his fingertips like ancient amulets, representing his final hope for this relationship and the last straw he could grasp in his despair. When the girl took the carvings, the subtle sensation of their hands brushing seemed to send a shockwave through both of their bodies. The terror of the unfolding truth mingled with an indescribable complex affection for Leo in the girl's eyes, making her look profoundly striking in that fraction of a second. Leo's heavy words, "I miss you," landed like a massive boulder on thin ice, completely shattering the tense silence. Throughout his long months of monitoring her, he had forgotten how to love naturally, mechanically repeating the control that gave him peace of mind. Only now, facing her confusion and detachment, did he truly feel the desolation of the labyrinth he had constructed. For the first time in this gamble against destiny, he felt a genuine urge to retreat. He wanted to explain but found all words entirely useless. The intricate patterns on the wood recorded his replication of her every detail during those long days of waiting, his only solace in the world, yet the very fuse that would push her to the edge. At the end of this confrontation, they stood divided by the window frame, forced into two entirely different worlds. This was more than a boy's confession, it was an ultimate indictment of obsession versus freedom. Leo ultimately turned and walked away, his lonely silhouette telling her that even if he could manipulate the course of this life, he could never command her genuine understanding and forgiveness, which remained the most distant, unreachable horizon of his entire existence. Joey sat quietly at the counter. A dim desk lamp cast her long flickering shadow onto the wall above. In this sparse orderly space, the ticking of the clock click sounded exceptionally loud, like a solemn chronicle of events or a futile protest against the relentless passage of time. The telephone suddenly shattered the silence, its ring sharp and jarring. Joey picked up the receiver to find Juliet on the line, his voice carrying an undeniable urgency and anxiety. "Are you really okay after the riot?" he asked. Joey replied calmly, "I am sick. Sam just got a few scratches. It is nothing serious." She maintained a placid surface, trying to hide the turbulent currents churning underneath. Yet, when the phone hung up, a dead silence settled over Sam's house once more. The scene shifted violently, as if the film of that memory were being brutally yanked backward by an external force. It was that nightmare of a delivery room, blinding white everywhere, the air thick with the sickening smell of antiseptic. Sam was screaming in absolute despair, while the syringe in the doctor's hand glinted with the cold light, a tragedy destined to collapse. The mother suffered a massive hemorrhage, and bright red blood instantly flooded Joey's entire field of vision. Was this a real memory or an unhealable nightmare buried deep in Joey's mind? It shattered the boundaries of reality. Joey sat in an upscale restaurant, facing a girl wearing a baseball cap. The investigation into Dr. Jung was the only poison thorn left in Joey's heart. The girl in the cap delivered a blow like ice water poured over her head. There is no doctor by the name of Jung at the local hospital. This discovery caused an irreconcilable fracture in Joey's perception. Which was real, her memory or the official records? Her hands shook as she dialed Juliet's number. "I found something, that Dr. and Mrs. Wang completely vanished from Seattle together." Was this the unveiling of truth, or the beginning of another layered lie? Seattle, a city that had never existed in her memories, suddenly hung over her head like a sword of Damocles. When she called out to Mom on the other side of the screen, her voice trembled with helpless suspicion. In this looping space, Joey's interactions with her mother took on a twisted, sweet quality. Joey tried to grasp some tangible truth from that blank space in her life, but whenever she reached for the edge of reality, a splitting headache struck without fail, cutting off her thoughts. She cradled her face in front of the mirror, watching her delicate nose and melancholy eyes drift further away from her reflection. She realized she was losing more than just her past. The very thing called self was dissolving into a blur. Her mother always solved all her troubles, but how many filthy secrets were buried beneath the silent erasure of everything concerning Sam? Joey curled up on the bed like a small child while her mother, like a gentle creator, softly stroked her face. This was a conversation about promises and protection, her mother's voice firm yet tender. "No matter how much the outside world goes to ruin, Mom will always protect you." This was no sanctuary, it was a prison. In her mother's warm embrace, Joey's weeping grew from a low whimper to a desperate sob, as if she were pouring out a lifetime of grievances all at once. The vow to be mother and daughter again in the next life sounded like a tragic elegy. The scene repeated, as if trying to inject a drop of bitter sweetness into the memory. The amusement park, meant to be a sanctuary of joy, became the stage for Joey's final curtain call. What did the blood-red text reading, "One day remaining," signify? Joey sat in a wheelchair while Juliet pushed her through the bustling crowds, her mother hovering beside them like an inseparable guardian spirit. This was the final flawless illusion of a happy family. On the carousel, Joey felt fragile and deeply unsettled. The creaking of the wooden horses became the sole soundtrack to the moment. "Juliet, call Mom over too." In this final celebration, no one could be missing. They had to paint every ounce of warmth flawlessly before the end arrived. She was trying desperately to lock down this final semblance of order. But the moment her mother left for the restroom, the world around her turned into a crumbling dream. Time seemed to freeze entirely. Her mother did not return, and the suffocating pressure in the air made it hard for Joey to breathe. Then a man named Eric appeared without warning, his sudden presence tearing the illusion of warmth to shreds. "Some pasts can never be erased," he stated with an all-knowing, icy detachment. Joey's knuckles turned white from gripping the photograph. Was any of this real? Locking eyes with Eric served as a brutal reminder. It was time to wake up. Late at night, flames licked at the acceptance letter. The red firelight danced across Juliet's face, a silent mockery of their fate. The text dissolved into ash. They had tried every possible way, yet escape remained impossible. The end of the amusement park visit was marked by a ritual with a camera to freeze their perfect smiles. With a sharp click, the Polaroid camera captured a snapshot of the three of them together, Joey sitting in the center, the ultimate proof that they had once existed, fought, and loved. The lights of the carousel faded into the darkness one by one, leaving the scene looking like a corrupted tape being wiped clean. The dialogue grew sparse and fragmented, filled with a philosophical emptiness. The old notebook lay ruined, the book that held all her past memories now showing nothing but blank white pulp in the corner. "All the traces are fading away," Joey whispered, her voice like a candle flickering in the wind. What was being lost was more than just words, it was the very proof that they had ever lived. White smoke rose from the ashes in the fire pit as Juliet kept his head bowed in pain. Her mother's voice echoed from the dark, "Those final efforts were useless, nothing can be changed." Her mother's words were cold, yet they represented the undeniable reality. Joey stared at the ashes, completely losing her way. In that final moment, the moonlight shone with a tragic beauty, resembling a silent goodbye. Her mother held her in a tight embrace, the gentlest confinement in the world, while Juliet stood quietly by watching their world crumble into pieces. Joey bolted upright in bed, her eyes meeting a metallic device labeled jellyfish that cast a harsh industrial glare. The entire world she knew was an illusion. "You are just a program, an experiment," a mechanical electronic voice sliced through her consciousness. The mother-daughter bond, the emotions, the amusement park, everything was merely a script designed to let an artificial consciousness experience human nature. She was a ghost engineered by a creator, never a real human being. Joey sat alone in the looping space of her room, her expression unreadable and complex, while outside, the carousel continued to creak, repeating its endless melody forever. As the sole heiress to the massive multinational conglomerate known as the Giant Group, Juliet spent her younger, more naive years genuinely believing that as long as a person possessed true love in their heart, they could easily withstand any violent storm this world could throw at them. During that foolish period of her life, she fell hopelessly and deeply in love with an incredibly ordinary young man named Frank. For the sake of this romance, which she viewed as a grand, all-consuming passion that had to succeed at all costs, she made the shocking decision to completely abandon her wealthy, privileged background as an elite daughter of high society. Standing firmly against the severe warnings and angry protests of her family elders, she severed ties with the immensely powerful Giant family, whose influence in the business world was unmatched at the time. She went so far as to change her name and completely hide her true identity, willingly stepping down into the mundane, repetitive existence of an ordinary, everyday citizen. At that time, she was so thoroughly blinded by her own emotions that she believed luxury, elite status, and billions of dollars were nothing more than temporary illusions, while the promises made by the man standing next to her were the only things that would last forever. Regular working class people often fool themselves into thinking that mutual affection is enough to carry a couple through a lifetime of hardship, and back then, Juliet was deeply trapped in that exact same wave of self-induced romantic delusion. She took it for granted that her 7 long years of quiet companionship, constant care, and completely selfless sacrifices would easily buy Frank's permanent devotion and ensure he would never betray her. Throughout those 2,500 days and nights, she left her glamorous life behind, hid her sharp wit and high society habits, and spent her time in a small kitchen cooking his favorite meals, always leaving a warm light on in the apartment during those late nights when he returned home from building his startup. She watched him grow from a broke kid with absolutely nothing to his name into a man who slowly established a solid foothold in the competitive business world, and she watched his company expand from a tiny failing workshop into a moderately successful corporation. Juliet genuinely believed that her long years of endurance had finally brought her to the dawn of true happiness, assuming that once Frank achieved fame and fortune, he would treasure the wife who had stood by him during his darkest hours and abandoned her entire world for his sake. However, time passes silently and relentlessly, and the true cruelty of 7 long years lies in the fact that it doesn't just cause a person's youth to fade under the weight of daily chores. It is more than enough to completely alter things that once seemed entirely set in stone, such as a man's heart and his sacred vows. When Juliet finally survived the grueling, 9-month journey of pregnancy, enduring days and nights of excruciating, agonizing labor pain that left her on the verge of fainting in a cold hospital room, she used every ounce of her remaining strength to give birth to their daughter. Lying on the hospital bed, completely pale and physically drained, she truly believed that this tiny fragile life was the beautiful crystallization of their 7-year romance that had successfully crossed a massive social divide. To her, this baby was the ultimate proof that their family was heading toward a perfect, blissful future. She naively assumed that her days of suffering were finally over, and that nothing but endless warmth and peace awaited her. The day she finally checked out of the luxury postpartum care center, the sky was completely clear, and the bright radiant afternoon sun poured down on her without a single cloud in sight. Juliet's heart was overflowing with an incredible amount of anticipation for the future as she held the tiny baby close to her chest with a level of care that bordered on religious devotion. This infant was the living hope that she had literally risked her own life to pull back from the gates of death. This child was her entire world. As the gentle sunlight hit her, the new mother looked down at her daughter's sleeping face, and a wave of intense emotion washed over her. She felt that all the isolation, disrespect, and mocking comments she had endured over the past 7 years, along with the physical pain of childbirth that had nearly torn her body apart, had become entirely worth it in that single second. Yet on that exact same day, fate decided to deliver a brutal, incredibly insulting slap directly to her face. Clutching her baby tightly, Juliet walked out of the care center doors, looking around for the husband who had promised over the phone that he would personally come to drive his wife and newborn child home. Instead, her eyes locked onto a familiar luxury vehicle parked right by the curb. It was a brand new car that she had secretly bought for Frank using her own hidden personal savings for his birthday last year, but right now, the scene inside that vehicle felt like a poison dagger driven straight into her eyes. She could clearly see another young, attractive woman sitting comfortably in the passenger seat, Frank's newly hired personal assistant, Grace. In that fraction of a second, Juliet's body, which had been warm from the afternoon sun, along with her hopeful heart, felt as though they were snatched by a massive invisible black hand and dragged straight down into a bottomless frozen abyss. A piercing cold rushed from her feet straight to her brain, freezing her in place and making it nearly impossible to breathe. According to the most fundamental rules of professional behavior and human boundaries, a personal assistant to a corporate executive is supposed to maintain a strict, disciplined, and carefully monitored distance between work duties and private life. In the elite training Juliet had received since childhood, any breaking of this line was considered entirely unacceptable, yet the scene playing out right in front of her eyes was not just a blatant insult to her dignity as a wife, it was violently painful to look at. Grace didn't show even a hint of panic or shame as a subordinate when she saw the CEO's legal wife walking out with a newborn child instead. She sat in the passenger seat, a spot that belonged exclusively to Juliet, as the wife looking completely relaxed and entirely at ease. She was leaned back in the comfortable leather seat, resting her chin on her hand, with absolutely no intention of getting out of the car to help Juliet with her bags or open the door for her. On the contrary, she rolled the window down halfway and stared at Juliet with a patronizing, arrogant look that was filled with absolute disrespect, carefully watching Juliet's rigid, shocked reaction. To make matters worse, Grace's eyes lingered coldly on the face of the sleeping newborn baby for a moment, showing no joy for a new life, only deep annoyance and contempt. She casually pressed the window control button to lower the glass all the way down, tilting her chin up slightly as she spoke in a flat, cold tone that was as indifferent as if she were reading a boring corporate memo for her boss. She displayed zero respect for the woman who actually owned the company, merely twisting her lips into a fake smile. In a soft but incredibly grating voice that made Juliet feel physically sick, she said smoothly, "Hey Juliet, Frank caught a last-minute emergency board meeting today and absolutely couldn't break away, so he specifically ordered me to come collect you and the baby. It is getting pretty windy out here, so go ahead and climb into the back seat quickly. We don't want the baby catching a cold or Frank will be worried sick about her." This sentence, which tried to sound caring but had every single word laced with venom, completely marked the official beginning of a waking nightmare that would torture Juliet through countless sleepless nights. Originally, Juliet had planned to use this special day of checking out of the care center a day that represented a fresh start for her and her child to take Frank to a romantic restaurant. There, she was finally going to reveal the massive truth she had intentionally hidden from him for 7 years, that she was actually the sole heiress to the trillion-dollar giant group. She wanted to give him the biggest surprise of his life as a grand gift, or more accurately, she wanted to provide a solid layer of permanent financial security to their relationship, which had been a bit strained due to the financial struggles of his startup. She wanted to tell him that he would never have to drink himself to sleep again just to please arrogant clients for corporate sponsorships, and he would never have to beg banks for a few $1,000,000 because his wife possessed the power to command the largest conglomerate in the country. But as she stood there looking at this ridiculous, insulting, and filthy display, watching Grace shamelessly stake her claim on Frank right in front of the legal wife, the giant family daughter showed an unbelievable amount of restraint and logic. She didn't scream like a hysterical woman in the middle of the street, nor did she break down in tears demanding to know why an assistant was sitting in her seat. Instead, she quietly forced all the humiliation, rage, and her initial urge to confess everything back down into the deepest, coldest corners of her heart. In that dead silence, looking at Grace's smug expression, she felt as though fate were laughing at her own stupidity. She finally came face to face with a freezing truth she had spent years trying to ignore. The man running this company, ruined by money, power, and greed, was no longer the Frank who had stood in the pouring rain 7 years ago, promising to fight the whole world to protect her. He had changed into a completely different person, Simone and fake, cruel, and thoroughly repulsive. From that day forward, inside the offices of the Frank Corporation, a company Juliet had helped build piece by piece with her own sweat and tears, almost everything that occurred felt like a calculated, slow execution, designed to chip away at her remaining pride. Grace used her position as Frank's special assistant to extend her influence directly into Frank's personal life under the guise of urgent business matters. What made Juliet's blood run completely cold with rage was an incident during an executive board meeting. As Juliet walked into the room, Grace intentionally reached up to touch a brilliant custom-made diamond necklace around her neck, ensuring it caught the light. Juliet recognized that necklace instantly. It was a priceless piece custom, designed by a world-renowned jeweler, given to her by her mother on her 18th birthday. It was one of the few personal treasures she had kept close during her years of living in obscurity, serving as her emotional anchor. Later, when Frank claimed his company desperately needed capital to survive, she had handed this necklace over to be used as collateral for a bank loan. She never could have imagined that instead of returning to her jewelry box, it would end up around Grace's neck as a trophy to flaunt in public. After the meeting adjourned, Juliet blocked Frank inside the CEO's office, demanding to know why he had given her mother's personal heirloom to an assistant. Frank just leaned back in his leather chair, not even bothering to look up at her. In a flat, completely indifferent voice, he dismissed her concerns with a few words that hit her like a heavy iron hammer, shattering any remaining illusions she held about their 7-year marriage. He said coldly, "It is just an old necklace. Juliet Grace has been working past midnight every single day to secure that massive deal with the Hengtai Group, and she is completely exhausted. I noticed her neck looked a bit bare, and walking into a negotiation room like that makes our company look cheap to high-end clients. I just redeemed the necklace from the bank and lent it to her for a few days to keep up appearances. Why are you suddenly acting so incredibly petty and narrow-minded? It is just a piece of jewelry. Do you really have to come to my office and make a scene over something this insignificant? Don't forget that I am the one supporting you and the baby right now while you sit at home in luxury. Can't you show a little appreciation for how hard I have to fight out there?" This deep agonizing betrayal was never a sudden occurrence. Beneath the calm surface, the current of deceit had been flowing for a long time. It was only when Juliet swallowed her pride and activated the Jine family's private intelligence network, a resource she hadn't touched in nearly a decade, that the bloody truth was fully uncovered. It turned out that the reason Grace received unconditional protection from Frank the moment she joined the company had nothing to do with her business skills. It was entirely because of her face. Grace happened to look 70 to 80% identical to Summer, the girl who had been Frank's unattainable first love, a woman whose memory had been buried deep in his heart since his college days. Frank had spent his entire life obsessing over this first love who had abandoned him because he was broke, and Grace's sudden appearance perfectly satisfied his twisted desire to make up for the past. Grace came from an ordinary, working-class family and knew exactly how to use her beauty and her face as a deadly weapon. To satisfy his old regrets, Frank had personally created and supported Grace as a perfect substitute right by his side, and as for the manipulative, ruthless Grace, she didn't care at all about being a replacement. As long as she possessed that face and held Frank's heart, she had a permanent shield to do whatever she wanted, in front of a man who was now worth millions. She could openly enjoy every luxury Frank handed her and confidently insult his original wife, because she knew that as long as Frank's illusion of his first love remained intact, her position in the company was completely safe. During the corporate assembly that followed, Frank's blatant favoritism toward Grace became even more shameless, reaching a point where he completely ignored basic professional standards and the company's reputation. That evening, hundreds of employees gathered in the main ballroom to celebrate their quarterly profits. As Grace was walking toward the stage with a glass of red wine, she accidentally twisted her ankle because of her incredibly high heels. She let out a soft cry, collapsing onto the floor, spilling wine over her dress, and looking up at Frank with tears welling in her eyes. In that moment, Frank completely lost his mind as a corporate president. Disregarding the hundreds of eyes staring at him, and ignoring the immediate whispers and finger-pointing from the senior executives, he rushed onto the stage like a madman. In front of the entire company, this proud CEO dropped to his knees. As the event's high-definition cameras captured every single detail, he gently removed Grace's high heels, cradled her ankle in his hands, and began blowing on the injury with a look of pure agony on his face. Grace leaned back into his chest, looking out at the crowd with a smug expression that clearly signaled her victory to everyone in the room. Juliet, who was standing in the corner as the company's vice president, watched the two of them put on this disgusting display while listening to the quiet laughter of the employees around her. She dug her fingernails so deep into her palms that they nearly drew blood, the rage in her heart exploding to an absolute peak. The bonuses and luxury gifts that were supposed to be handed out to the staff that night felt like a massive insult to her entire existence. Juliet could no longer sit back and do nothing. Deep within her soul, she reminded herself that she wasn't just a helpless victim trapped in a failing marriage. She was the proud daughter of the elite Jine family, a woman who had once given up everything for love, but who could now destroy this entire business world with a single word. Late that night, sitting alone in her dark office, she opened the company's anonymous online forum. Right at the top of the page was a pinned post featuring a photo of Frank and Grace sharing an intimate drink at a party, their bodies pressed so tightly together that the chemistry between them practically jumped off the screen. In the comment section, oblivious low-level employees looking to flatter the boss were leaving comments like, "Frank is so sweet to Grace, Grace is so incredibly lucky, and Frank and Grace are the real power couple." Staring at these insulting words, Juliet's fingers shook with pure rage and disgust. She finally saw the whole picture, realizing that Grace's ambitions were far larger than she had initially thought. This woman didn't just want to steal her husband, she wanted to use Frank's weakness to manipulate company opinion and completely strip Juliet of her title as vice president and legal matriarch of the firm. Since the enemy had brought the fight directly to her doorstep, Juliet decided she would no longer retreat. The very next morning, she put on her high heels, walked into the main lobby with a freezing aura, and confronted Grace directly in front of everyone. She didn't spare a single ounce of the woman's dignity, demanding answers about the filthy affair carried out behind closed doors. Grace, who had spent years learning how to survive in the gutter, immediately shifted gears the moment she noticed a crowd forming and saw Frank exiting the elevator. Her arrogant face instantly transformed into a mask of pure terror and vulnerability. With a loud crash, she threw herself onto her knees right in front of Juliet, grabbing the edge of Juliet's skirt as tears streamed down her face. She screamed at the top of her lungs, ensuring every person in the lobby heard her. Juliet, please, I am so sorry. I never meant to come between you and Frank. I just respect his leadership so much. I swear I never did anything wrong. If my presence makes you uncomfortable, I'll bow to you right now. I'll beg for your forgiveness on my knees. Just please don't force Frank to fire me. This dramatic display, combined with her stained clothing, caused the surrounding employees to immediately take her side. The crowd naturally sided with the perceived victim, and the staff began muttering insults under their breath, calling Juliet a heartless, abusive tyrant. Right at that moment, Frank rushed over, and seeing his precious substitute being humiliated by Juliet, he didn't even bother to ask what happened. He stepped in like an angry animal, pulling Grace to her feet and wrapping his arms around her tightly. He turned his head toward Juliet, his eyes filled with pure hatred as he bellowed, "Juliet, when are you going to stop throwing these insane tantrums? Look at yourself. You've turned into a bitter, completely psychotic monster. Grace is just an ordinary employee. How can you humiliate her like this in public? Can't you leave me with a shred of dignity?" Staring at the man who had held her hand 7 years ago and sworn that he would never let a single tear fall from her eyes, the man who was now publicly destroying his own wife's dignity for the sake of a manipulative assistant, Juliet felt no sadness. Her tears ran dry, replaced by a deep sense of mockery. In that exact second, she realized how devastating the consequences of her past choices truly were. She looked at Frank's angry face and let out a clear laugh that echoed through the dead silence of the lobby. She didn't waste a single word. She calmly opened her designer briefcase, pulled out a thick document, and slammed it directly into Grace's tear-stained face before turning her cold eyes onto Frank. "Frank, stop acting in this pathetic soap opera. Your precious assistant completely botched a contract with our European clients last week, causing them to return our entire shipment of luxury wine. A single bottle of that collection is worth $6 million at international auctions. Since Grace loves celebrating her status so much, and since you care about her so deeply, make sure she deposits that $6 million into the corporate account within 3 days. If you want to pay her debt yourself, go right ahead, or perhaps these wonderful co-workers standing around calling her an angel would love to donate their own money to help her out." With that, Juliet held her chin high and walked out of the building under the stunned gazes of the entire staff, never looking back. Following that massive public confrontation, the couple entered a long, suffocating Cold War. This silence dragged on for 2 whole months. During these 60 agonizing days, although Frank still returned to the house every night, due to pressure from his parents and the press, his mind and soul had long since drifted off to Grace's bed. Even while sharing the same mattress, he kept his back turned to Juliet, text messaging another woman late into the night. He would leave his sick wife and crying child in the middle of a torrential rainstorm at 3 in the morning just because Grace called claiming she was scared of a power outage or needed stomach medicine. He had directed every ounce of his warmth, patience, and attention toward Grace, completely abandoning the woman who had nearly died giving birth to his child. Influenced by Grace's constant lies, he even began to treat his own daughter with cold suspicion. One afternoon, under the excuse of an urgent business review, Frank actually brought Grace into their home. The moment Juliet opened the front door, she witnessed a scene that caused her blood to boil. Grace was sitting on the living room sofa, intentionally pressing her sharp fingernails into the fragile, dangerous fontanelle of her 3-month-old daughter. The baby was screaming in pure agony, while Frank sat nearby looking at a folder, completely indifferent. In that fraction of a second, Juliet's maternal instincts and 2 months of repressed rage exploded into an absolute fury. She lunged forward with terrifying speed, slammed Grace away with all her strength, and ripped her child into her arms. "Grace, if you ever dare to lay your filthy, disgusting hands on my daughter again, I swear to God you will leave this house in a body bag." Juliet's voice was completely hoarse with pure rage, the killer instinct in her eyes, forcing Grace to stumble back in absolute terror. Frank, rather than realizing his own failure as a father, stepped in and grabbed Juliet's wrist with enough force to crush her bones, screaming, "Juliet, what is wrong with you?" Grace saw the baby crying and was just trying to use an infant massage technique to calm her down. "This child isn't just yours. Stop using your sick, twisted mind to assume everyone has bad intentions. Look at yourself. You look like an ugly, raging psycho right now. Where did your gentleness go?" Listening to this man turn black into white to defend his mistress, Juliet didn't shed a single tear. She just stared at Frank with a cold, dead gaze. She looked at the face she had loved for 7 years, feeling nothing but pure disgust for the stranger standing before her. The air in the room stopped moving, leaving only the baby's soft whimpering. Juliet's breathing slowed down, and she gently handed the child to the trembling nanny, ordering her to take the baby to her room. Then, she slowly turned around, stepped directly into Frank's space, and looked up at him. The rage vanished from her face, replaced by a calm voice that lacked any human warmth. "Frank, 7 years ago I gave up my family and my entire life for you. Today, I take my love back. Get out of my sight." Before Frank could even respond, Juliet reached into the coffee table drawer and pulled out several thick documents stamped with high-level corporate seals, slamming them hard against his chest. The papers scattered across the floor, the top page clearly displaying the words divorce application and divorce agreement. Frank prepared to laugh it off, but the moment his eyes landed on the second document, his heart skipped a beat. It read, "Official termination of capital and complete withdrawal of investment by the Hengtai Group from the Frank Corporation." Hengtai Group was the financial backbone of the entire region, and the sole reason Frank's company had survived and maintained its bank credit lines. Frank had always known the chairman of Hengtai was a man named Zhang, but he had never in his wildest dreams imagined that the legendary Zhang family was the birth family of the wife he had spent 7 years treating like a nobody. Without Hengtai's exclusive capital and without the Zhang family's protection, your company will be swarmed by creditors within 12 hours, declaring absolute bankruptcy and total ruin. Along with this withdrawal notice, sign these divorce papers. I am stripping you of every single asset, the company stock, this house, and full custody of our daughter. Frank collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the documents as his body began to shake uncontrollably. He had never expected this woman, who had always quietly tolerated his abuse, to strike back with such a ruthless, one-shot execution. A few days later, at the 100-day celebration for their daughter, an event Frank had organized in a desperate attempt to attract new investors, Juliet made a spectacular entrance. She had completely discarded the cheap, simple clothing of the past 7 years, replacing it with a custom haute couture black evening gown that signaled her true status as the head of the Zhang Empire. The noble, commanding aura of the sole heiress to the country's largest fortune was on full display, forcing the city's high society to lower their heads. In this final struggle of Frank's career, Juliet took absolute control. She didn't look at Frank even once, casually announcing the immediate bankruptcy of his firm to the media and investors before turning toward the exit with absolute pride and confidence. In that moment, Frank finally understood the sheer scale of what he had thrown away. Watching his clients run away from him like he was a disease and seeing his company stock crash to zero on his phone screen, he completely broke down. He rushed off the stage, grabbing Juliet's dress, begging her to listen, trying to apologize and use their past memories to earn her pity. Juliet simply pulled her hand away coldly. She had shattered his pride and broken the chains of a marriage that brought nothing but disgrace. This 7-year farce, born from Juliet's blindness and ended by Frank's greed, was finished. Frank was destined to spend the rest of his life paying for his arrogance and his pursuit of a substitute first love by facing absolute financial ruin. Juliet's departure was not a tragedy. It was the magnificent return of a queen to her rightful throne at the peak of the financial world. The celebration venue was beautifully decorated, with massive crystal chandeliers throwing bright light across the grand ballroom, making the entire space look like daytime. The air was filled with expensive perfume and high-end wine, creating a festive atmosphere. Yet beneath this beautiful surface and the sounds of clinking glasses, the destruction of a prominent marriage was silently beginning. Juliet stood in the center of the room in her priceless gown, completely ignoring the staring crowd, her cold gaze locked onto Frank. Frank looked sharp in a tailored brown suit, chosen by Grace, wearing gold-rimmed glasses that hid his deceitful nature. He looked every bit the successful young businessman. Standing right next to him was Grace, dressed in a white gown, looking submissive but throwing triumphant glances at the guests. In front of the entire high society, Juliet spoke up, her low voice carrying immense authority. authority. Frank, I want a divorce. The words hit the room like a thunderbolt, bringing a dead silence over the ballroom. Frank didn't realize the danger yet, his face contorting into an angry scowl. He felt Juliet was intentionally trying to humiliate him, so he barked back. Juliet, what kind of game are you playing now? At our daughter's celebration, you are talking about a divorce. Juliet looked at his fake self-righteous expression with pure disgust, laughing coldly. How many times do I have to say it? Frank, I am completely done dealing with your lies. Frank felt a wave of panic, but he tried to defend himself for the sake of the cameras, his eyes darting around the room to avoid Juliet's gaze. Juliet tore away his mask of innocence, pointing out that for the past 2 months, Frank and Grace had been living like a married couple in luxury hotels and private clubs, completely ignoring his actual family. Juliet gave Frank zero opportunity to save face in front of the press. She stepped directly into his space, her eyes like ice. Frank, you claim you did everything for the company, but 2 months ago, while I was recovering from childbirth, you took your assistant on a luxury global vacation, acting like a couple in every high-end boutique. And today, at my daughter's celebration, you had the nerve to bring this homewrecker here, letting her act like the mother of my child to greet our guests. What kind of fool did you think I was? Hearing his secrets exposed to the world, Frank's face turned completely white, sweat sliding down his forehead. He tried to stammer that it was all for the company's future to secure international capital, attempting to use a $100 million deal as a shield to protect his pride. He thought he could use his old corporate excuses to manipulate Juliet just like he used to, but the woman standing in front of him felt nothing but complete detachment for the pathetic man before her. As Frank desperately tried to spin the story to blame Juliet, a sharp notification chime echoed through the silent room. Juliet's phone screen lit up with a brief message that carried absolute destruction. Frank's corporate bank accounts had been frozen, and every major partner had terminated their contracts. Juliet glanced at the screen, a cynical smile touching her lips as she watched Frank continue his pathetic performance on stage. As the seconds ticked away, Juliet looked up at him with absolute certainty, saying, Frank, that $100 million deal Grace supposedly closed to save your company? Let me tell you the truth, the parent company of that entire project is owned by the Giant Group. I prepared that deal as a 7th anniversary gift for you, but now, it is gone. Hearing this, Frank was utterly confused, a deep terror gripping his heart, while Grace turned pale as a ghost, trying to rush forward to stop Juliet from speaking. Juliet ignored her completely, looking down at her watch to count down the final seconds of Frank's empire. As the clock struck midnight, the ballroom doors were thrown open, and every guest in the room received the same breaking financial news. Alert: Frank's corporation had collapsed due to massive fraud and the immediate withdrawal of all foreign capital. The room exploded into absolute chaos, and Frank's 7-year illusion of success vanished instantly. Frank stared at his phone in absolute shock, his hands shaking so violently that he nearly dropped the device as endless liquidation notices poured in. He couldn't accept that 7 years of hard labor had turned to dust in a single second because of this woman's words. Juliet stood her ground, looking down at his pale, terrified face, and said calmly, Now you finally know who commands your fate. Frank completely lost his balance, unable to salvage his sinking ship. Grace acted like a total fool, shouting to the guests that the news was fake, trying to use Hengtai Group's name to control the crowd, but the guests had already seen through her lies, and Frank collapsed onto the floor, realizing he had crossed a line with a woman who held the power of a god. Juliet didn't waste another second watching him cry. She turned on her heel and walked out of that room full of lies, stepping into a waiting luxury vehicle. In the quiet interior, she answered a call from her grandfather, George Zhang, the man who held absolute authority over the Jiang Empire. After confirming the divorce, the old man laughed with pride, telling her lovingly, Juliet, you've suffered for 7 long years. Next week, the Giant Group will host the largest gala this city has ever seen, where I will formally introduce you as the sole heiress and new CEO of the entire empire to high society and the global media. Let the world know you belong to the Giant family. Juliet agreed softly, a cold light of vindication flashing in her eyes. Her life had finally turned around. The cleanup of Frank's company began with absolute ruthlessness. In a desperate bid to save his skin, Frank issued a fraudulent corporate memo claiming Juliet had been demoted and stripped of her vice president title due to losing a major deal by leaking company secrets, handing the position to Grace instead. The staff gossiped endlessly about this obvious betrayal, knowing Juliet had been the real backbone of the company for 7 years. Grace thought this was her golden ticket to the elite class, even hiring security guards to block Juliet on the day of the handover. But Juliet just listened to her insults with a calm face, not caring about the meaningless title at all. She was focused on the final financial strike that would destroy the entire Frank family for good. On the day she went to collect her belongings, Grace sat in Juliet's custom leather chair, acting incredibly arrogant, ordering the staff to deep clean the office to remove any trace of lower-class presence. Juliet smiled coldly, walked over to the desk, and picked up the iced Americano Grace had ordered just to show off. The next second, Juliet splashed the entire cup of dark coffee straight over Grace's head, drenching her hair and running down her expensive dress. Grace shrieked in horror, unable to believe Juliet would actually attack her in public. Frank rushed out of his office hearing the screams, his rage boiling over as he saw Grace crying on the floor. He raised his hand to strike Juliet, but his arm was instantly snapped by Juliet's personal security team. Juliet looked at the screaming man with pure contempt, throwing the final divorce papers and asset transfer demands into his face, forcing him to sign away his authority in front of his entire staff. Frank signed the papers with a shaking hand, completely broken by the sudden ruin of his career. Juliet looked at him and felt absolutely nothing. That same afternoon, Frank's parents, desperate to save their wealth, broke into Juliet's luxury waterfront villa, a property she had bought entirely with her own money before the marriage. They began trashing the place, smashing her custom decor and art collections to search for jewelry. Juliet returned to the villa, looked at the disaster without a single tear, and immediately called the chief of police. With heavily armed units backing her, she confronted the old couple. "This house belongs entirely to me, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the Frank family. You are all under arrest for armed burglary and grand larceny." Frank's parents wept and screamed for their son to protect them, but Juliet just watched coldly as the police dragged them away in handcuffs before slamming the door shut. By this time, Frank's company was completely dead. Under Juliet's financial orchestration, Hengtai Group officially issued its withdrawal notice, demanding full repayment of an $80 million loan within 3 days. Frank sat alone in his dark, empty office, staring blankly at the financial ruin in front of him. He finally realized that the mastermind behind his absolute destruction was the very wife he had spent 7 years treating like a servant. He thought he was a financial genius, only to realize he was nothing but a joke to the true elite class. In the final moments of the story, Frank knelt in the mud outside Juliet's vehicle, weeping and begging for forgiveness, claiming he couldn't live without her. But Juliet just looked at him with an icy calm, sliding the final prosecution documents for corporate fraud across the desk, showing him that he was heading straight to a federal prison. Using the immense power of her family name, she had taken back her life, returning to a world of absolute peace. This entire sequence of events showed Juliet's perfect evolution from a victim to an absolute ruler. She was no longer the submissive wife who suffered in silence, but a powerful leader executing perfect justice. The downfall of Frank and Grace was entirely their own doing, a cold judgment brought down by a woman who refused to be broken. This wasn't just a story about a divorce, it was a masterclass in how a woman could pull herself out of the mud and rise to the absolute peak of power, destroying those who tried to take her dignity. She never lost her identity, finding the perfect balance between reality and ultimate vindication. Frank slammed down his drink, the cheap alcohol rushing straight to his head as his rage boiled over. He turned to Juliet with a flushed neck, his words dripping with bitter sarcasm as he yelled that her college achievements were completely useless if they amounted to nothing but waste paper that couldn't bring in a single dime to save his company. The father ordered Juliet to go buy him more alcohol immediately, threatening to break her legs if she wasn't back in 10 minutes. Juliet listened in silence from the dark corner, her fists clenching as a spark of rebellion flared into a roaring flame. To survive and raise the tuition money to help Frank start his career in the early days, Juliet and her companion walked grueling distances through the city's underbelly under a blazing sun. Sweat poured down her neck into her rough collar as her physical strength reached its absolute limit, every heavy load pressing against her shoulders, ruthlessly exploiting her labor. The alleys of the old town were a dark labyrinth that never saw the sun. Supporting each other, they pushed through the dense crowds with extreme effort, every step a battle for their souls. During a brief rest, they crouched on the steps outside a marketplace to share a cheap pastry. Her friend looked at Juliet with pity, handing her a drink to ease her exhaustion, as they spoke in hushed tones about the abusive reality of Frank's home life and his deadbeat father who took pleasure in his torment. Inside a bright classroom, students gathered to gossip about why the top student, Juliet, had suddenly dropped out right before graduation. Her friend quietly revealed the truth to a classmate. Frank's father had been working an illegal gambling scheme and got scammed out of every cent. To pay off that endless debt and rescue his family from that monster's grip, Juliet had abandoned her education to work as a manual laborer to keep Frank out of prison. The girl's eyes grew watery as she stared at the empty desk, feeling a profound helpless sorrow. At their old apartment door, the streetlights stretched their shadows long against the pavement when a nauseating, metallic stench hit them. Juliet stopped in her tracks, spotting a massive, horrific splash of deep red liquid under the dim corner light. It was animal blood mixed with filth, maliciously thrown against the door as an unmistakable terrible threat left by the loan sharks his father owed money to. Juliet's anger boiled over, her fists clenching until her knuckles popped, finally seeing the absolute selfishness of the man they were dealing with. Inside, Frank's mother trembled, cowering next to an old cabinet with bruises covering her arms. The father strolled in through the front door, showing zero remorse for the gruesome sight outside as he turned his aggression onto Juliet and Frank. A violent confrontation erupted between them as Frank pointed at the defiled walls, his voice shaking as he demanded to know exactly how much trouble his father had dragged to their doorstep. The arrival of a top-tier legal team marked the turning point of the conflict on a rainy night, entering the dilapidated courtyard with absolute authority. The lawyer held a thick stack of documents detailing ironclad evidence of the father's criminal activities, speaking with flat, devastating professionalism that instantly crushed the father's remaining bravado. It turned out Juliet was never alone. A mysterious benefactor had been quietly watching over her, using the power of the law to completely shift the power dynamic. The legal judgment came down swiftly before everyone's eyes, a 5-year prison sentence for the abusive father. In that moment, the young Frank, who had spent his youth drowning in hardship, finally found his salvation and received the foundation to start his future company. In the end, peace settled over the villa at the waterfront. The warm glow of a candle illuminated her daughter's calm face and lit up Juliet's path forward. Having survived the dark storm, her life was finally filled with light. Juliet looked up at the night sky, making a silent vow to protect her child and lead the giant group to the absolute peak of the world. Lily dragged her exceptionally heavy silver aluminum magnesium alloy suitcase across the cold stone floor, standing directly in front of that massive imposing dark walnut door, her trembling fingertips softly brushing against the freezing, cracked pattern electronic keypad as the lock let out a sharp, solitary electronic beep that echoed through the empty hallway. As the heavy deadbolt clicked and slid open with a muffled metallic thud, she raised her foot and stepped over the threshold of this house that had held 7 long years of her miserable married life, yet there was not a single trace of lingering affection or hesitation in her pale face. Instead, her expression carried a cold sense of absolute finality, paired with a deep, crushing exhaustion that could only come from enduring thousands of silent, sleepless nights filled with endless disappointment. Outside the grand windows, the morning sun poured through the thick, lush branches of the sycamore trees, casting vibrant green shadows across the room, but no amount of summer light could mask the absolute emptiness and freezing desolation inside her shattered heart. 7 whole years of her life, 7 years of her youth completely wasted, and 7 years of unconditional silent companionship had all completely vanished into thin air in a single day, destroyed by a man's relentless betrayal and arrogance. She walked slowly down the old stone steps of the estate, looking back at the quiet, lifeless family courtyard, knowing deep down that she was finally cutting ties with her past and killing the weak version of herself. Stopping right by a patch of damp, mossy grass, she halted her mechanical steps, slowly raising her right hand into the cool air as she slid off the custom platinum wedding ring from her ring finger, inch by inch. That ring once symbolized a lifetime vow and carried their wedding anniversary carved inside, but now she just tossed it aside with a flick of her wrist, watching it trace a desperate arc through the air. The ring plunged deep into the wet mud and rotting leaves, losing all its light, never to shine again in the dirt. Right at that exact second, when the gloomy dark sky felt like it was going to swallow her alive, a massive black British umbrella opened with a sharp whoosh right over her head, blocking out the pouring rain. Ryan stood quietly behind her, like a silent, towering mountain, offering an unbreakable wall of strength in his flawless, custom-tailored dark gray suit without a single wrinkle on it. Their eyes met perfectly under the edge of the umbrella, sharing a deep, silent understanding that only those who survive life and death could ever know, signaling the start of a massive storm about to rock high society. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan was driving his sports car like a complete madman, racing through the streets toward their luxury townhouse located in the most expensive neighborhood of Los Angeles. He slammed the heavy carved front door open and shouted his wife's name into the empty, lifeless living room, but the only response he got was his own echo and the butler bowing his head in total panic. The butler stood there trembling, gripping an old ostrich feather duster tightly in his hands, looking incredibly nervous and terrified as he whispered that Miss Lily had packed up and left with the child half an hour ago. Hearing those words, Ethan froze instantly on the spot, as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning, his eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses filled with total disbelief and a raging wave of fury. He lost his mind, fiercely demanding to know her location and phone number, but the butler just shook his head helplessly under the immense pressure, whispering that Miss Lily left absolutely no messages or forwarding address. Standing all by himself in the middle of that vast, cold living room under the glittering crystal chandelier, Ethan looked incredibly small, frantic, and completely completely ridiculous to anyone watching. Like a crazed gambler who lost his last dollar, he began tearing through the massive walk-in closet, pulling down shelves and dumping boxes just to find any small trace she might have accidentally left behind. Then his eyes caught a dark, hand-tailored luxury suit hanging deep in the closet, a suit he had never seen before in his life, and his face instantly turned an ugly shade of ash gray. He lunged forward, grabbing the suit by the collar so hard that the veins on the back of his hands popped out, spinning around to scream at the butler, demanding to know whose suit this was. The butler quickly lowered his head, stammering that Miss Lily had personally prepared it for him a few weeks ago with a gentle smile, saying she wanted him to wear it to attend their daughter's wedding. Hearing the words daughter's wedding felt like a dull knife twisting violently inside his chest, and the sharp pain made it hard to breathe because he finally realized it was all a distraction. Lily had crafted a kind, beautiful lie just to keep him blind while she planned her grand escape from his control. Suppressing the explosive rage that threatened to burn away his remaining sanity, his eyes turned bloodshot as he pinned the butler against the wall, demanding to know how many random men Lily brought home while he was away. Faced with Ethan's toxic accusations and blind jealousy, the butler used all his strength to look up, stating firmly that Miss Lily spent the last 7 years raising the child, never interacting with any outsiders. But those words didn't calm him down at all, instead making his sick suspicion grow wilder like weeds in his mind. She left just 2 minutes ago, and if he ran now, he could still catch her car. That single thought consumed his brain as he spun around and bolted out into the blinding storm like a trapped animal. The downpour grew heavier by the second as Ethan ran down the wet asphalt driveway of the VIP parking lot, completely losing his dignity as a high-profile CEO in front of his staff. His expensive leather shoes splashed through the muddy puddles, his voice cracking as he screamed for his wife at the top of his lungs into the dark empty sky. Right then, a sleek black Rolls-Royce representing absolute wealth and power drove right past him with a cold smooth silence. Through the heavily tinted, one-way bulletproof glass window, one could clearly see Ryan holding the steering wheel with one hand, completely focused on the road ahead. Lily sat quietly in the passenger seat, her head down, calmly scrolling through her custom phone without looking out once. Ethan saw her face clearly through the glass and completely lost his mind, clawing at the moving car and pounding on the windows like a lunatic trying to force them to stop. But the car never slowed down, its brake lights never flashed, leaving him face first in the dirt within seconds. His desperate cries and tears were instantly drowned out by the thunder, forcing him to watch everything he took for granted drive away, way out of his reach forever. Inside the perfectly insulated black car, the space was incredibly warm, quiet, and completely detached from the world. Lily stared at her screen, looking at the chat history containing thousands of cold manipulative texts from Ethan over the years. Without a single moment of hesitation, her slender finger pressed the red delete and block button, her movements clean and completely detached. She looked up at the city lights blurring past her window, feeling a massive weight lift off her shoulders, realizing her 7-year prison sentence of a marriage was finally over. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, occasionally glancing over at her with a deeply restrained tenderness that he had kept hidden for years. To break the heavy silence in the car, he reached into the back seat and handed her a soft, pure cashmere jacket. He gently told her to cover her legs so she wouldn't catch a cold from the car's blasting air conditioning. Lily turned her head, looking at the man who had protected her from the shadows for so long, a soft warmth returning to her eyes as she gave a polite, quiet, "Thank you." At that moment, the peaceful luxury inside the car contrasted sharply with Ethan's pathetic, muddy breakdown out in the storm. As Ethan collapsed onto the wet pavement, crying out for her not to leave, Chloe appeared from the dark alleyway. She held a custom lace umbrella, stepping out silently behind him like a venomous snake waiting for the perfect time to strike. Looking down at Ethan's miserable state, her eyes held zero sympathy, filled instead with a sick, twisted sense of victory. She knelt down, whispering toxic rumors right into his ear, making every single word hurt his broken pride like a needle. She lied, saying Lily had been hiding assets for 6 months and already had a younger, wealthier lover lined up, but Chloe completely underestimated Ethan's obsessive nature and the deep trust he still had in Lily's pride. Despite his raging jealousy, he knew Lily was far too proud to ever stoop to something so cheap and low. He snapped around, glaring at Chloe like she was toxic garbage, warning her to shut her mouth before he lost control. To completely destroy Chloe's hopes of replacing her, he screamed that even if his company went bankrupt, Lily would always be his wife. The fake smile froze on Chloe's face, instantly replaced by a deep, ugly hatred because she couldn't accept his obsession. She tried to use his company's massive debt as leverage, claiming her family was the only one who could save him, but Ethan wouldn't even look at her face, disgusted by her desperate attempt to use his downfall for her own gain. He stood up from the mud, knowing deep down that the woman who helped him build his business from nothing would never betray him. As time moved on, the wheels of fate began to spin faster across two completely completely different worlds. After hours of driving, Lily finally arrived at her family's massive centuries-old estate in the heart of New York. It was a true powerhouse property, heavily guarded by armed security, with a cold historical aura that demanded respect. The moment she stepped through the grand gates, her silver-haired grandfather was already waiting in the courtyard, leaning on his cane. The old man, who had ruled the business world for decades, felt his eyes well up with tears the second he saw her. That single hug held years of unspoken heartache, regret, and the deep love the old man had for his granddaughter. Ryan stood back respectfully, and the grandfather gave him a firm nod of approval, calling him his grandson-in-law. It was clear that the family head had already accepted Ryan as the only man worthy of protecting the family heir. At that exact moment, Lily finally let her guard down, crying softly as she told her grandfather she chose the wrong man. The old man patted her hand gently, his warm smile marking the official return of the true heir to the grand family fortune. Meanwhile, Ethan's life took a massive dive straight into a freezing dark abyss of total financial ruin. Desperate to save his company, he had to swallow his immense pride at a luxury restaurant in Los Angeles. He spent days preparing a lavish dinner for Mr. Vance, the top investor who held the power to save his company. Ethan acted incredibly humble throughout the meeting, even pouring the wine himself, just to keep the man happy. Right as they reached the critical point of signing the contract, the heavy doors were kicked open with a loud bang. Chloe barged in, holding oily cheap red plastic bags filled with street food, followed by Ethan's loud parents. His parents loudly complained about how hard the place was to find, dumping the trashy bags right onto the expensive table. The entire atmosphere in the restaurant froze instantly, and the background music cut off as everyone stared in shock. Mr. Vance stared at the leaking red plastic bags, his face twisting in pure disgust at the absolute lack of class. Ethan felt his dignity shatter into dust right then and there in front of the most important investor in the city. His parents kept bragging about how much money they saved by packing up leftovers, completely blind to what they did. They had absolutely no idea they just destroyed their son's entire career and future with their cheap habits. Ethan shook with pure rage, trying to explain, but Mr. Vance stood up, having lost all patience for this circus. Ethan lost the entire business game, his project collapsed, and he was totally humiliated in front of his peers. As Chloe kept nagging and blaming him for being weak, Ethan finally snapped, screaming at them to get the hell out. His desperate roar echoed through the room, filled with the crushing weight of total defeat, failure, and isolation. He felt completely abandoned by the world, and as Chloe kept talking, the intense stress caused his vision to go black. His body gave out completely, and he collapsed heavily onto the marble floor, fainting in front of the crowd. When the scene shifted back to an elegant, quiet dining room in New York, it felt like an entirely different universe. Lily and Ryan sat by the window, raising their glasses of fine wine, talking with total grace and ease. Ethan showed up at the entrance, looking exhausted with a wrinkled suit, having tracked her down through old contacts. Watching the perfect harmony between the two, his heart filled with an overwhelming wave of jealousy and bitterness, he walked toward their table like a ghost, trying to bring up their past marriage vows one last time. Lily looked up slowly, her eyes showing zero anger, only a freezing icy detachment that cut through him. She calmly told him they were legally divorced and asked him to respect himself in public from now on. That single word, respect, cut deep like a sharp knife, instantly killing any remaining illusions he held inside. Ryan casually adjusted his custom cuffs, his powerful presence completely overshadowing Ethan's desperate look. Ethan tried to bring up their early days when they were broke, but Lily just stared at him like he was a stranger. That painful confrontation ended in another total crushing defeat for Ethan as security escorted him out. Desperate to fight back, Ethan risked his entire remaining net worth on a major gala a week later. He called his few remaining associates night and day, planning to present a secret biotech patent at the event. He naively believed that if he proved his business worth, Lily would see his value and come back to him. He had no clue that to his enemy Chloe, his secret plan was just a pathetic struggle of a dying man. The story quickly entered the darkest side of human nature inside a private VIP lounge filled with smoke and noise. Chloe sat deep in a leather sofa, swirling her wine glass with an ugly glint of pure hatred in her eyes. She ordered her hired thugs to ambush Lily during the gala and ruin her reputation with a dangerous drug. She wanted to use the dirtiest methods to drag Lily down from her position as the family heir for good. The trap was set the moment Lily walked past the dimly lit, unmonitored hallway near the VIP lounge during the gala. Several men ambushed her from the shadows, and despite her fierce resistance, the drugged air made her lose her strength. Chloe stood at the end of the hall, watching Lily struggle with a twisted, sick smile of pure victory on her face. Ethan managed to arrive at the scene at the absolute last second, driven by a sudden gut feeling. The moment he kicked the door open and saw the thugs surrounding Lily, his protective instincts exploded. Like a furious lion defending his mate, he let out a roar and charged into the room without a weapon. He didn't care about the heavy iron pipes or the blood pouring from his own mouth during the brutal fight. His eyes were locked onto Lily, and keeping her safe was the only thing that mattered mattered to him anymore. It was a bloody violent rescue, a dangerous gamble where he risked his life to save the woman he wronged. Once Lily was safe behind him, a relieved smile touched his bloody face right before a bottle shattered over his head. The man who was exhausted by greed and pride finally found his true purpose in the middle of a fistfight. Covered in blood, Ethan stood firmly in front of Lily like an unbreakable wall, a tragic end to his story, but his brave actions didn't change the dark outcome of the night. As the sirens wailed outside, Chloe screamed in panic as the doors were kicked open by a large squad of family bodyguards and police officers. The entire room fell into chaos, and Lily looked at the bloody man with a mix of deep pity and sadness. There was no love left in her eyes, only a quiet realization that their story was truly over. Ethan tried to take a step toward her, but his deep wounds bled heavier with every movement he made. He whispered that he did it all to prove he never stopped caring about her and their 7 years together. Lily closed her eyes slowly, let out a long sigh of finality, and walked away with her guards without looking back. She left him bleeding on the cold floor, staring helplessly at the doorway where she disappeared forever. The end of the story felt like a silent final judgment from fate for everyone involved in the tragedy. Chloe was handcuffed on the spot and taken away to a maximum security facility for her long list of crimes, but Ethan was also arrested and sent to prison for his part in the violent brawl and old corporate fraud charges. The immense power of the Powerhouse family showed its absolute dominance, ensuring he would never trouble her again. The business empire Ethan spent his life building collapsed completely within days of his final arrest. In the cold prison visiting room, Ethan stared out a tiny window at the gray sky, waiting for Lily every day, but deep down he knew the woman he neglected for 7 years would never step foot into that dark place again. That was their final end, showing 7 years of marriage was just a long exhausting nightmare. Waking up from it left nothing but shattered pieces and bloodstains across the memory of their youth. In his cell, Ethan replayed images of Lily busy cooking in their tiny first apartment when they had nothing. He thought about the day they got married, when they were completely broke but genuinely happy together. Back then he promised her that his hard work would eventually give her the entire world, but his own arrogance and greed dealt him a painful ultimate slap to the face at the end of the road. Lily was never a prize to show off or a tool to be sacrificed for his corporate greed. She was a brilliant independent soul who deserved real respect, not his toxic control and cold shoulder. Her final departure wasn't about money or another man, but the result of countless lonely nights of crying. She finally realized he could never give her the basic human respect and peace she needed to survive. Returning to her family in New York, Lily didn't waste a single moment crying over the past. She threw herself entirely into her role as the head of the global family conglomerate. Her world belonged in international boardrooms, far away from a small kitchen and Ethan's toxic jealousy. She picked up her old business dreams, showing incredible talent and sharp execution that amazed the industry. Her strategic partnership with Ryan expanded their business globally and built a beautiful new lifestyle. Ryan truly understood her coldness, her hidden vulnerability, and her absolute need for freedom. Their relationship had none of Ethan's toxic possessiveness, only a deep connection between two equal souls. This was the exact kind of mature, respectful love Lily had been searching for her entire life. As for Chloe, justice caught up with her inside a dark cell where she lost all her glamour. She spent her days screaming at the prison walls, cursing Lily's luck and Ethan's final betrayal. She hated every woman who lived a better life, completely blind to her own toxic actions. But her bitter anger was completely useless against the harsh reality of her long prison sentence. The evil she tried to inflict on Lily backfired completely, destroying her life from the inside out. Ethan's parents lost their luxury home after the courts cleared their son's remaining assets to pay his debts. They were sent back to their old farm, broken, forgotten by the high society they tried to run with. In that quiet place they would spend their remaining nights crying over the son who lost everything in the city. Ethan grew old and frail behind the prison walls. As the years slowly passed by, his dark hair turned completely gray, looking nothing like the powerful young CEO he used to be. He became just another forgotten inmate, staring blankly at the cold corner of his cell every night. Every time darkness fell, he replayed that rainy night in his head, wondering what if things were different, what if he hadn't been so arrogant, or what if he had given her a little more warmth over the years. But life has absolutely no do-overs, and their story officially ended at that gala week later. Lily continued to walk elegantly through high society in her long black dresses, a true queen of the industry. She never cast a single glance back at the man who was stuck in the mud of his own making. That was reality, harsh and completely honest. Showing love can't survive without real respect. Letting go was the only real choice left for her to save her own soul from his darkness. The heavy prison doors slammed shut with a booming echo, sealing his fate for the rest of his life. The chapter of their chaotic marriage was closed forever, and Lily's name became a legend of female independence. She wasn't anyone's wife anymore. She was fully her own person. person, standing tall at the top of the world. The wedding ring she tossed into the mud was buried deep under the dust of time, never to be found. The dream of their 7-year marriage was completely gone, leaving only a bright new future ahead of her. Inside the private club lounge, the dark lights made the dangerous situation feel even more terrifying. The violence exploded when the thugs slammed Lily hard onto the freezing marble floor without warning. The visual impact of that exact moment was incredibly brutal and filled with pure malice. Her proud head was forced against the cold ground, her arms pinned tightly behind her back by heavy hands. The crushing pain and public humiliation caused her immense physical and emotional distress as she struggled. Standing over her with a twisted, superior look on her face was Chloe in her expensive designer suit. Her elegant clothing contrasted sharply with her vicious, low-class actions against the family heir. She dug her sharp high heel firmly into the back of Lily's hand, enjoying the sound of her pain. A dark smile spread across her face as she spit out cruel insults, mocking Lily's current situation. The men in the lounge laughed along, treating the horrific abuse like a cheap show for their entertainment. Suddenly, the heavy metal door was slammed open with a loud crash that shook the walls. Ethan stormed into the room, his eyes blazing with pure fury behind his gold-rimmed glasses. Seeing Lily on the floor and Chloe laughing made him freeze instantly as his heart shattered. His protective instincts took over, and he knelt down to scoop Lily up into his arms, trembling with rage. Chloe stumbled backward in her high heels, her face turning pale as she realized she was caught. Ethan's deep voice demanded answers, his cold tone carrying an absolute judgment that terrified her. Chloe stuttered, her eyes darting around the room in complete panic as she tried to find a way out. She tried to act innocent in front of him, putting on a fake sad face to hide her guilt. She quickly suggested they take Lily to the nearest hospital right away to show she cared. But that seemingly kind suggestion was actually a calculated deadly trap she planned from the start. She knew the private club was located out in the middle of a very isolated rural area. The nearest hospital was over an hour's drive away through heavy traffic and winding roads. With the type of dangerous drug in Lily's system, any delay would cause permanent brain damage. Ethan ignored her fake act completely, knowing they couldn't waste a single second on her lies. He said going to that hospital was out of the question because it was far too distant to save her. He held Lily tightly against his chest, acting like a fierce, unbreakable shield to protect her life. He was determined to keep her safe from any more harm, even if it cost him his own life. He barked a cold order for everyone to get the hell out of the room immediately. His powerful voice commanded absolute authority, forcing the thugs to step back in fear. He completely iced Chloe out, refusing to give her a single glance as he carried Lily away. He held her with total gentleness, treating her like a fragile treasure he finally found again. The love in his eyes contrasted sharply with his cold fury toward the criminals in the room. This time, he was fighting to truly protect her, without any selfish motives or greed. The long hours crawled by, and Lily finally woke up early the next morning in a quiet room. She lay in Ethan's beautifully decorated private bedroom, her body still weak and exhausted from the drug, but she felt a deep sense of safety and peace after surviving that terrifying nightmare. Ethan sat at his desk near the window, reviewing corporate files in the soft morning light. His tired silhouette showed the calm focus of a man who was completely in control of the situation. Hearing her move on the bed, he stopped working instantly and rushed over to her side. He handed her a warm glass of water, his hands trembling slightly with relief as she looked at him. Lily drank the water slowly as the terrifying memories of the previous night flashed back in her mind. She looked at him and softly said he was the one who saved her from that dark place. Ethan nodded quietly, wasting no time on small talk or useless explanations about his own injuries. He handed her an entire file of solid evidence he gathered against Chloe's family overnight. It detailed exactly how Chloe planned the ambush and paid off the club staff to isolate her. Over the next 6 days, things seemed quiet on the surface of the financial district. But behind the scenes, Lily plotted a massive flawless revenge against everyone involved. She stayed patient like a skilled hunter, waiting for Chloe to walk right into her trap. The upcoming luxury charity gala would be the absolute center of her entire retaliation plan. It was going to be the absolute end of Chloe's social life and her family's fortune for good. Looking in the mirror, Lily's cold eyes shone brighter than any diamond in the world. She wasn't a helpless victim anymore, she was the powerful heir, ready to destroy her enemies. The gala venue was decorated on a massive grand scale that blocked traffic across the city. When Chloe arrived and saw Lily standing there completely fine, her heart stopped. Her face went completely pale as a ghost, looking absolutely terrified in front of the cameras. The cheap shots she took at Lily's background now looked completely ridiculous next to her presence. Lily walked toward her with total elegance, putting intense psychological pressure on her with every step. As the grand gala hit its peak, all eyes in the room turned to Lily. Ethan stepped forward, walking right into the center of the bright spotlight on stage. In front of the entire high society crowd, he dropped to one knee with total humility. Without saying a single word, he pulled out a ring symbolizing the true wealth of the family. The brilliant spark of the massive diamond lit up Lily's beautiful calm face on the screens. Chloe watched the proposal happen, and her remaining sanity completely broke down. Lily wasn't just an ordinary woman, she was the absolute priority of the entire empire. That public moment completely crushed every single single insult Chloe ever made about her past. Chloe lost the game completely, and her pride turned into dust under Lily's feet as the crowd cheered. Standing under the glittering crystal chandelier, Chloe's face twisted with pure rage and terror. Her light cream-colored dress made her look like a broken puppet on a public stage. Faced with Lily's sharp, undeniable questions, her innocent act completely failed to convince anyone. Lily stood tall in her elegant black dress, radiating pure power, wealth, and authority. Her rare blue diamond necklace caught the light as she stared Chloe down without mercy. Her words cut through the silent ballroom like a sharp, decisive blade of justice. She exposed the entire lounge plot, the paid thugs, and the dangerous drugs clearly to the media. The ugly truth was laid bare for the entire high society crowd to see on the big screens. Chloe tried to deny it, but her trembling words sounded pathetic against the cold hard facts. Her eyes filled with pure hatred and desperation as the guests began pointing and whispering. Lily calmly held up her phone, displaying the undeniable video proof of the assault to the reporters. The entire ballroom went dead silent before a massive wave of shock spread through the room. The guests gasped as the details of Chloe's violent crimes became completely clear. Reporters swarmed in, their camera flashes lighting up Chloe's ruined, terrified face from all angles. That public exposure completely broke Chloe's remaining strength, and she fell to her knees. She looked over at Ethan for help, hoping he would save her from the angry crowd, but Ethan just glared back at her with absolute disgust and cold indifference from the stage. His words were freezing cold as he called her out for her lies and her dark soul. He loathed her for tricking him and destroying his family's reputation over the months. Her desperate actions cost him his marriage, his true love, and his entire career. Losing Ethan's support made Chloe snap, and she started screaming like a wild animal. Her sharp broken voice echoed through the high ceilings in a furious crazy rant. She cursed Lily and every wealthy family who was born into privilege and high class. She demanded to know why Lily got all the respect while she had to struggle in the dirt. She blamed her failure on her background, never seeing her own sick greed as the cause. Her inner darkness was the real reason her life was completely ruined at the end of the day. Lily just raised an eyebrow, looking down at her with total pity and cold distance. She calmly said real respect can't be won through cheap mind games and violence. She told Chloe her narrow, toxic mindset was her own biggest obstacle to happiness. Those calm words pushed Chloe completely over the edge into total, violent madness. She lunged forward with a wild scream and shoved Lily right into the deep pool. Lily splashed heavily into the cold water, disappearing beneath the surface in her heavy gown. The entire ballroom erupted into total chaos as people started running and screaming for help. Ethan and Ryan dove into the deep pool at the exact same fraction of a second. Without a single thought for their own safety, they plunged into the dark water to save her. The pool rippled wildly under the bright gala lights as they swam desperately toward her figure. Ryan pulled Lily out of the water first, his eyes full of deep, long-lasting devotion. At that exact moment, a 7-year-old secret finally came to light in front of the cameras. Ryan was the actual teenager who saved Lily from the burning car crash all those years ago. Ethan stood in the water, drenched and completely shattered by the realization of his mistake. The truth destroyed his remaining pride, leaving him completely helpless in front of the crowd. Meanwhile, Lily's grandfather ordered his armed guards to handle the screaming Chloe. They dragged the crying woman away to face the federal police immediately without mercy. The once arrogant woman was reduced to a pathetic, sobbing mess on the wet floor. Ethan knelt outside the grand estate gates later that night, watching the cold windows. He saw Ryan gently wrap a warm cashmere blanket around Lily's shoulders inside the house. He realized their 7 years of misunderstandings could never be fixed by his tears. His current regret meant absolutely nothing to the family he tried to hurt for profit. The grandfather's cold look from the balcony signaled the absolute end of Ethan's social life. He was left alone in the pouring rain to deal with his own massive failures. He watched the woman he loved walk away into Ryan's protective arms for the rest of her life. The timeline sped up quickly after that dramatic night at the Global Charity Gala. Once Lily recovered her full strength, Ryan showered her with deeply meaningful support. They connected on a spiritual level that went way beyond wealth or business partnerships. Ethan returned to his empty, quiet townhouse, feeling completely detached from reality, staring at an old photo of their wedding day. The intense grief made him cough up blood. The red stains on the hardwood floor matched his broken, dying heart perfectly. Lily eventually visited his hospital bed one last time before his final sentencing. Despite the divorce and the pain, she showed him a final act of pure grace. She personally brewed him a warm cup of ginger tea to ease his physical pain. That simple, quiet gesture was her final goodbye to the youth they spent together. During her brief visit, Ethan finally learned the full truth about the old car accident. He realized Ryan was the brave boy who pulled his unconscious body from the fire too. The truth shattered his entire world, and the former CEO broke down crying like a child. He completely let go of his pride, admitting his utter failure in front of her. Later, the sun shone beautifully on Lily and Ryan's private castle wedding. The ceremony was small, elegant, and filled with genuine joy from real friends. A beautiful little girl named Joy ran through the crowd with a bright smile. She jumped right into Ryan's arms, calling him daddy at the top of her lungs. That sweet moment surprised the guests and made everyone smile with tears in their eyes. Their true love story actually began in the ashes of that crisis 7 years ago. The grandfather smiled warmly from his seat, happy to see his family finally whole. When they said their vows, their clear voices sounded completely certain about the future. After 7 years of pain and survival, Lily finally broke free from her heavy chains. She started a beautiful new life with the man who truly loved and respected her. The struggles of the past just made this happy moment feel infinitely sweeter to her. The long darkness of her previous marriage was completely gone, replaced by light. The sun shone down on the couple as they looked deep into each other's eyes. The past faded into the wind, leaving only a bright, successful journey ahead of them. Their old conflicts didn't matter anymore. Now that they found their true home, they finally found each other at the absolute perfect time in their lives. The camera pulled back slowly, showing the beautiful estate and the laughing child. The perfect scene created a powerful memory that would stay in their hearts forever. Ethan watched the live wedding broadcast from his quiet gray prison cell. He finally let go of his bitter regrets and found a strange sense of peace. He was glad Lily found safety, and he finally stopped holding on to his old greed. He let their tragic story become a distant memory of a dream he was glad to wake up from.